Just after sunrise, a morning exerciser happened to witness a horrifying scene. A young woman was lying lifeless near the edge of a quiet neighborhood in Chapel Hill. There were no clues about what had happened, no sounds, no witnesses, just an eerie silence. Who was she? How did she end up there? And why did her life end so abruptly? As the police started to investigate, they uncovered a tragic story that would impact two cities profoundly. Eve Carson was born on November 19, 1985, in Athens, Georgia. She was raised in a loving home by her parents, Teresa and Bob Carson. She grew up with her brother Andrew in Athens, where her exceptional qualities began to emerge. From an early age, Eve distinguished herself academically and socially. At Clark Central High School, her remarkable intelligence and charm led her to become the valedictorian and the student body president, winning 55% of the student vote. These early achievements hint at the bright future she is on her way to creating. Eve's warmth, intellect, and leadership grew even stronger when she began her studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2004. Despite receiving offers from prestigious universities like Princeton and Yale, along with scholarships, Eve opted to attend a public university. She believed in the importance of education and obtained a significant scholarship while pursuing a double major in political science and biology. Her goal was to build a career in the medical field. Outside of her studies, Eve engaged deeply in service and leadership. She led multiple student organizations, completed a challenging 4-year leadership program, and participated in outreach initiatives like Girls on the Run. Additionally, she spent time tutoring children in local schools and worked in underprivileged communities abroad through the Moorhead Cain Summer Enrichment Program. Her volunteer experiences took her to Ecuador, Egypt, and Ghana, where she served in various roles, including medical assistant and community educator. Eve was not just a student leader, she was a beloved figure in her community. Friends admired her, faculty respected her. Her lively spirit made a positive impact wherever she went. However, in March 2008, everything changed. Eve was last seen at home around 1:30 a.m. after deciding to stay in and study while her housemates went out. Sometime between that moment and early morning, she faced an unimaginable tragedy. By 5 a.m., she was missing. Later that morning, authorities found her car at the intersection of North Street and Hillsborough Street in Chapel Hill, following the tip. Tragically, her body was found just a mile from her home. She had been shot and left. Investigators were initially confused by the case. The motive was unclear, and the incident seemed random. With no immediate suspects, law enforcement began examining phone and bank records for clues. A key piece of evidence in the investigation emerged when Eve's abandoned SUV was discovered. Authorities believe Eve Carson was shot multiple times around 5:30 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, with one bullet striking her close range in the right temple. To advance the investigation, Chapel Hill police announced a $25,000 reward for any information that could lead to her killer's arrest. Forensic specialists found that the last activity on Eve's computer occurred at 3:37 a.m., which helped narrow down the time frame in which she might have been abducted. Just 21 minutes later, at 3:55 a.m., her debit card was used at an ATM in University Mall, Chapel Hill. The ATM recorded several transactions, including one that successfully withdrew the maximum daily limit of $700, while 5 additional attempts failed. Fortunately, the ATM surveillance system captured grainy images of the person using the card. The footage showed a young male wearing a black hoodie and cap, and in one frame, there seemed to be a second figure in the back seat of the car, possibly Eve, although the image was too unclear to confirm. At 4:44 a.m., another attempt was made to withdraw money, but no cameras captured the event. Less than 30 minutes later, Eve was shot and killed. However, her debit card was used again that day at 12:39 p.m., with 2 transactions made at a mini-mart on Moorhead Avenue in Durham. Over the next 2 days, several more suspicious transactions occurred, leading to a crucial piece of evidence. On March 7th, at 12:54 a.m., another surveillance camera captured another man attempting to use Eve's card. This individual was clearly not the same as the person filmed at the University Mall ATM, making him a second key suspect. The failed transaction and the clear video footage became pivotal moments in the investigation. As police worked to identify the individuals involved, the communities of Chapel Hill and Athens came together in grief. Eve Carson was buried on March 9, 2008, and her funeral was attended by hundreds of people. At the University of North Carolina, thousands paid their respects with a moment of silence. Initially, the investigation progressed slowly, despite having several images of the suspects. However, on March 12, just 1 week after Eve's murder, authorities received a promising tip. They identified a man who resembled a suspect from the surveillance video as 21-year-old Demario James Atwater. Atwater had a troubled past, with 2 prior felony convictions, making him familiar with the criminal justice system. He had violated parole and committed additional offenses while under supervision, and he was due to appear in court just 2 days before Eve's murder. His criminal record included charges for assault, robbery, trespassing, and banned substance possession with intent to distribute. He had also been caught with a firearm while on probation, but due to an administrative mistake, his court hearing was postponed past the date of Eve's death. Additionally, Atwater's home on Rosedale Avenue in Durham was located close to the crime scene. The investigation picked up momentum when detectives linked Atwater to Lawrence Alvin Lovett Jr., 17, a young man who closely resembled the person seen on the University Mall ATM footage. Both were school dropouts from Durham and had attended the same school, making their connection concerning. Atwater and Lovett became the main suspects in a case that shocked 2 communities and left a significant void for those who knew and respected Eve Carson. On the morning of March 12, 2008, authorities took action. After gathering substantial evidence and appealing to the public for information, police arrested 21-year-old Demario in Durham, charging him with the first-degree murder of Eve Carson. The case was developing quickly. Chapel Hill's mayor acknowledged the progress made but reminded the public of the profound grief that enveloped the town. A cherished student was lost, and the community was still struggling to cope with her absence. Lovett was eventually found and charged alongside Atwater. Although he was a minor, Lovett had a prior criminal record that included probation for theft and breaking and entering. Both he and Atwater was clear video evidence connecting them to ATM transactions made with Eve's card. The investigation reached a crucial stage in late March when a grand jury indicted both men on multiple serious charges, including first-degree murder, first-degree kidnapping, armed robbery, possession of a firearm by a felon, felony larceny, and possession of stolen property. Lovett faced additional legal issues as he was also charged in connection with the earlier murder of 29-year-old Abhijit Mahato, a Duke University graduate student from India. Mahato had been kidnapped from his home on January 18, 2008, just weeks before Eve's death. He was forced to withdraw cash from an ATM and was later shot while returning home. There were many similarities between this case and Eve's, but the evidence linking Lovett to Mahato's murder was not strong enough, leading to his acquittal. Abhijit Mahato's murder remains unsolved to this day. The legal proceedings in Eve Carson's case have started in earnest. Prosecutors decided to try Atwater and Lovett separately. Atwater, being an adult, faced the possibility of the death penalty, while Lovett, due to his age at the time of the crime, could not receive that sentence. The prosecution began to piece together a disturbing account of events that took place in the early hours of March 5, 2008, a crime driven by greed and chance. Around 1:30 a.m., Eve remained at home to study while her roommates went out. Atwater and Lovett then saw Carson walking toward her car. They stormed into Carson's car with Lovett in the driver's seat and Atwater in the back seat. They forced she into the back seat, where Atwater held her hostage at gunpoint. Investigators concluded that the two were looking for an easy target. Both had been released on bond, were low on money, and had no prior connection to Eve. She was just a stranger they happened to encounter. This marked the start of a tragic series of events that would lead to a brutal and senseless murder. Digital records show that Eve Carson's computer was last active at 3:37 a.m. on March 5, 2008. Shortly after, her life took a tragic turn when she was kidnapped by Atwater and Lovett. They put her in the back seat of her own SUV and drove to several ATMs to withdraw cash. Surveillance cameras captured them at an ATM. Their second attempt at 4:44 a.m. at mall failed because they had already reached Eve's daily withdrawal limit. Lovett told a friend that throughout the ordeal, Carson tried to reason with her captors, telling them that they did not have to do what they were doing. She also begged for her life, telling them that they could take whatever they wanted and that they did not have to kill her. However, Lovett and Atwater decided to kill Carson because she had seen their faces. They took her to a wooded area about a mile from UNC to commit the murder. Carson had been shot 5 times. She was first attacked in the right shoulder, right upper arm, right buttock, right cheek with a .25 caliber pistol. Blood found in Carson's lungs during an autopsy showed that she was still alive and breathing after being attacked with the pistol. The 5th and fatal shot she received was from a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun. It went through her right hand, suggesting she was trying to shield herself, into her right temple and brain. According to a forensic psychologist and crime analyst, the way Carson was shot showed a complete lack of respect for others. After his arrest, Demario James Atwater confessed to his involvement in the crime. He confirmed that he was captured on the ATM footage and identified Lovett as his accomplice. To avoid going to trial, Atwater pleaded guilty to all federal charges and directly apologized to Eve's parents during sentencing. On September 23, 2010, he was sentenced to life in prison plus 30 years, thus escaping the death penalty. In contrast, Lovett decided to fight the charges against him. He pleaded not guilty to various state offenses, including first-degree murder, kidnapping, armed robbery, larceny, and possession of stolen property. His trial began in December 2011. After 2 weeks, the jury found him guilty on all counts, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Complications arose soon after. In 2013, the North Carolina Court of Appeals overturned Lovett's sentence, referencing a U.S. Supreme Court decision that deemed mandatory life sentences for juveniles unconstitutional. Lovett was 17 years old at the time of Eve's murder, which prompted a new sentencing hearing. During this hearing, Lovett spoke to the court, expressing remorse for his actions and acknowledging the pain he had caused. He argued that he was not the monster he was portrayed to be. However, the court upheld its previous decision, sentencing him once more to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a decision many felt was justified due to the severity of the crime. Since being incarcerated, Lovett has received several disciplinary infractions, indicating limited progress in his rehabilitation. Despite being a minor at the time of the murder, he has continued to display violent and disruptive behavior while in prison. There were further ripples tied to this case. Months after Diario's arrest, his stepbrother Shelton was fatally shot while leaving a party. Unlike Diario, Shelton was not involved in criminal activity, and his death devastated their family, particularly their mother, who, in less than a year, lost both sons in different tragedies. Eve's murder also cast a harsh light on failings within the criminal justice system. At the time of her death, both Lovett and Atwater were on probation and had repeatedly violated the terms of their release. Probation officers failed to respond effectively, even after discovering that Atwater had breached conditions multiple times. In February 2008, an arrest warrant was finally issued for Atwater, and he was taken into custody, but he posted a $10,000 bond and was released just days before Eve's murder. His court date had been scheduled for March 3rd, but was delayed due to administrative errors. 2 days later, Eve was dead. Authorities believe that the desire to recover his lost bond money was a key motivation for Atwater's involvement in the robbery. It is deeply frustrating that a series of bureaucratic failures allowed 2 dangerous individuals to remain free. The consequences were irreversible. Eve Carson was more than a victim, she was an exceptional young woman whose light touched countless lives. Intelligent, joyful, and driven, she dedicated herself to public service, education, and global outreach. Her legacy of compassion and leadership lives on. In her honor, the University of North Carolina established the Eve Carson Scholarship. The award, designed by students and approved posthumously, reflects Eve's own vision for helping others achieve their potential. It is granted annually to 2 juniors who demonstrate the same commitment to service, leadership, and academic excellence. Eve was considering graduate studies in science policy. Her future was bright, but that story was stolen. For all her achievements, it is the character of Eve Carson that continues to resonate. In her final moments, she chose to respond to hatred with compassion, asking her killers to pray. Even in fear, she embodied grace. Though her life was ended for less than $1,500, her impact was and remains immeasurable. The murder of Eve Carson in March 2008 was more than a singular act of violence. It was a seismic event that shattered the tranquility of Chapel Hill and Athens, exposing the fragility of life and the consequences of systemic shortcomings. Eve, a young woman of boundless potential, embodied the best of humanity: intelligence, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to making the world better. Her senseless death, driven by greed and indifference, left communities grappling with grief and questions that linger to this day. Yet, from this tragedy emerged a powerful testament to her character and influence. The investigation and prosecution of her killers, Demario James Atwater and Lawrence Alvin Lovett Jr., brought a measure of justice, but it also laid bare the failures of a criminal justice system that allowed two individuals with troubled histories to remain free. The bureaucratic oversights that enabled their actions underscore the need for vigilance, reform, and accountability. Eve's death became a catalyst for change, prompting North Carolina to overhaul its probation system and sparking broader conversations about safety and prevention. Her loss was a clarion call to address the cracks in the systems meant to protect us, ensuring that such tragedies are not repeated. Eve Carson's legacy is a challenge to us all: to live purposefully, to serve selflessly, and to confront injustice with resolve. Her life, though tragically brief, was a masterpiece of impact, and her memory continues to shape a better future. Tiffany James was born on August 18, 1980, in Tampa, Florida. She was the only child of Rosalind James and Turner Humphrey. Her parents were never married and separated soon after her birth. Her father moved away, started a new family, and showed little interest in her. Years later, as an adult, Tiffany decided to locate her father. They spoke, and she assured him that she held no grudges and wanted to keep in touch. This reunion allowed Tiffany to meet her half-siblings and their families, leading to the development of strong, positive relationships. Meanwhile, Rosalind focused on her own life and left Tiffany with her grandparents. Although Tiffany had both biological parents, she was primarily raised by her grandparents. Her mother Rosalind visited occasionally but did not play an active role in her upbringing. It was her aunts, Barbara and Vicky, along with her grandmother Beulah, who took on the parenting responsibilities. They ensured Tiffany attended preschool and school, celebrated her achievements, and supported her in every way. She was an outstanding student with a passion for literature and a creative spirit. She dreamed of opening her own beauty salon and becoming the best in her city. Tiffany was a sociable, popular, and stylish person. She often attracted attention with her looks and confidence, making her appealing to young men. While in high school, she started dating a boy named Derek Andrews, who was a year older. They both believed their love would last forever. In her senior year, Tiffany became pregnant and gave birth to their first child, a son named Derek, on July 26, 1998. This changed her plans for college, as she dedicated herself to motherhood. Derek took on various odd jobs to support his family, while Tiffany's family helped them as much as they could. In August 2002, 4-year-old Derek became a big brother when his parents welcomed another son, Darian, named after his paternal grandfather. At this point, Tiffany and Derek were living together in a small rented apartment. Although money was tight, they remained hopeful for their future and dreamed of creating a stable life together. A couple of years later, however, their romantic feelings faded, and they decided to separate amicably. The son stayed with Tiffany while Derek supported them and made an effort to spend time with his children. He eventually began a new relationship but remained committed to being an involved father to Darian and Derek. As a single mother with 2 young sons, Tiffany started to seriously consider her future. She wanted a career that would allow her to provide for her family independently. Since she had not pursued further education after high school, she was eager to change that. Tiffany enrolled in a medical college, aiming to become a cosmetic specialist. Her ultimate goal was to open her own practice or even a clinic where she could turn her passion into a successful business. To manage her finances better, she moved back in with her grandparents, as paying for both tuition and rent was too much of a burden. Her family helped care for her sons whenever she was at work or in class. After finishing her education, she got a job at a private clinic as an assistant to a well-known doctor. She had a steady income and began advancing in her career. For a while, it appeared that everything was finally coming together for her. However, she found herself lacking a strong, supportive partner to lean on during difficult times. In early 2007, Tiffany met a man named Daryl Williams. He was 14 years older than she was and had 3 grown children from a previous marriage. Despite their age difference, this did not hinder their romantic relationship. She believed that he was a mature and trustworthy man, genuinely prepared for a serious commitment. Their relationship developed quickly, and soon, Tiffany, at 27, found herself pregnant. This news shocked both of them, but they were excited, and Daryl proposed to Tiffany, who happily accepted. However, during the routine checkup, she learned she was expecting twins. In March 2008, she welcomed twin girls, whom she named Diamond and Denia. This happy event has brought joy to her life, and she has devoted all her love to her family, cherishing every moment spent together. Tiffany enjoyed taking her children to different events, discovering new activities, and creating lasting memories. She also loved dressing her daughters in matching outfits that gave them a fashionable appearance. Her older sons participated in sports like baseball, track, and swimming, while her twins, Diamond and Denia, began dance classes and rhythmic gymnastics at an early age. As the years went by, the children grew, but Tiffany and Daryl never married. Gradually, their relationship began to deteriorate as they found it increasingly difficult to communicate. Tiffany eventually realized that Daryl was not the person she had thought he was. Their relationship ended when she discovered his infidelity. Without any hesitation, she gathered her children and departed. After separating from Daryl, Tiffany relocated with her family to the quiet town of Brandon, Florida. This community was known for its strong infrastructure, low crime rates, and affordable housing, making it an ideal place to raise a family and start over. Eager to create a stable future, Tiffany completed a hairstyling program and landed a job at one of the top salons in town. She quickly built a loyal clientele and gained a reputation for her talent and creativity. Aspiring to open her own salon one day, she began looking for potential rental locations. Her skills, ambition, and rising reputation established her as one of the most in-demand stylists in the area, paving the way for a bright career ahead. As a single mother of 4, she moved into a spacious rental apartment in a newly built residential complex situated in one of the town's finest neighborhoods. Nearby amenities included a school, a dance studio, and a large sports center, everything she needed for a comfortable and fulfilling life for her family. By 2012, her sons had become more independent and often helped care for their younger sisters. Around this time, Tiffany decided to reconnect with her father and half-siblings. She traveled to Alabama to find them, and their family bonds were restored. They began to stay in touch, visit each other for holidays, and their children quickly grew close. Life was falling into place. Her finances were stable, and she was surrounded by loved ones. Although she felt secure about her future, Tiffany, a young, ambitious, and attractive woman, yearned for romance. She still believed in love and hoped to find a man who would love her and embrace her family, a man with whom she could build a strong and happy home. In 2014, Tiffany started her own small business, which began to thrive. That same year, at 34 years old, she reconnected with Ben, a man she had known in her youth but hadn't seen in nearly 15 years. Their unexpected encounter at a shopping mall marked the start of something special. Initially, they kept their relationship private. Ben was also a single parent who had recently settled in Brandon with his 2 young children. They began as friends, sharing coffee and meaningful conversations. When Ben finally confessed his feelings for Tiffany, she felt like the happiest woman in the world and admitted she felt the same way. Their relationship grew deeper and both families supported it. Tiffany was ecstatic, savoring this newfound happiness without rushing. She kept their romance discreet, sharing details only with her closest friends and family and refraining from posting pictures of them together on social media. Gradually, she prepared for a significant change as they decided to move in together and create a home as one family. On October 1st, 2015, Tiffany posted a romantic and mysterious message on her personal social media account. The post featured a photo of two hands clasped together, one male and one female, both adorned with wedding bands, set against the backdrop of a Bible. The caption simply read, "Yes." This suggested that she was engaged, but she chose to keep her fiancé's identity a secret for the time being. Tiffany and her family always put a lot of effort into celebrating Halloween. They planned their costumes ahead of time, carved pumpkins into glowing lanterns, and went out to collect candy from their neighbors. By this time, Darian and Derek were old enough to enjoy the holiday with their friends, while the younger twins, Diamond and Denia, still loved going trick-or-treating with their mom. Since they lived in a large apartment complex, going door to door wasn't this thrilling. Instead, they visited a nearby neighborhood filled with single-family homes, where Halloween decorations created a festive atmosphere. Families in costumes moved from house to house, and generous homeowners made sure to have plenty of candy, so no one went home empty-handed. That night was supposed to be fun and relaxing, but no one could have predicted the tragedy that was about to unfold. A local woman was home alone, preparing to watch a horror movie to get into the Halloween spirit. The streets outside were quiet, most families had already gone home, and she didn't expect any more trick-or-treaters. Around 9 p.m., she was dozing on the couch with the TV still on when suddenly there was a loud noise, like an explosion, that woke her up. At that moment, her front door, which she had forgotten to lock, swung open. Startled, she quickly got up to shut it. What she saw on her doorstep left her frozen. A figure dressed entirely in black, wearing a hockey mask like the ones from the Friday the 13th movies, stood there. Instead of a machete, the person was holding a shotgun. For a split second, it felt like a scene from a movie or an elaborate Halloween joke. In shock and unsure of her next move, she glanced down and saw a woman lying at the figure's feet, writhing in pain and struggling to move. The masked figure looked down at her for a moment before raising the weapon again. Terrified, the woman ran for her life. She slammed the door just as two more deafening gunshots rang out. Collapsing onto the floor, she covered her head with her hands, fearing she might be next. Then, silence. The stillness was broken by a faint tapping on the window. At first, she ignored it, too frightened to move. But when the tapping came again, she cautiously approached the window and, against her better judgment, looked outside. There stood a young girl, tears streaming down her face. Without thinking of her own safety, the woman rushed to the door to help. Outside, she noticed another young girl sitting on the ground, shocked, hugging her knees. Without hesitation, she brought both girls inside, locked the door, and grabbed her phone to call for emergency services. By that time, other neighbors had heard the chaos and called the authorities. When first responders arrived, they discovered a woman lying in a pool of blood on the pavement. Despite her critical injuries, she was still alive. Paramedics did everything they could, but unfortunately, on the way to the hospital, she died from her wounds. The victim had no identification, and the two young girls were too traumatized to speak. However, as more neighbors gathered, they quickly recognized the woman, Tiffany, who is the owner of a local hair salon, along with her twin daughters, Diamond and Denia. Authorities immediately contacted Tiffany's relatives, while Diamond and Denia were taken to the hospital for evaluation. Fortunately, neither child had suffered any physical injuries, but they were deeply traumatized. Mental health professionals were brought in to help them process the event. Many people had been out celebrating that night, and several witnesses recalled the horrifying scene. However, piecing together the full story was challenging, as many struggled to believe what they had seen. It all felt too surreal, almost like a staged performance. Meanwhile, the masked attacker slipped into the crowd of costumed revelers and disappeared without a trace. Neighbors reported seeing a silver Chevrolet sedan parked near the house shortly before the incident. Witnesses noted that the car sped off after the first loud noise but stopped a short distance away moments later. It was uncertain whether the driver fled in a panic or had a connection to the attack. Unfortunately, no one saw the license plate, and no one could identify the driver's gender. Adding to the difficulty, there were no security cameras in the area to capture the incident. Witnesses could not provide even a basic description of the suspect, who was fully covered in a costume, hood, hockey mask, and gloves. They only agreed that the attacker was slightly taller than average and had a muscular build. At the crime scene, Tiffany's handbag was found on the ground, with its strap torn and its contents strewn about. Initially, investigators considered the possibility of a robbery gone wrong, but this theory was quickly dismissed. The cash inside the purse was untouched, and Tiffany was still wearing several pieces of gold jewelry. Nothing had been stolen. Moreover, it seemed unlikely that such a violent act would occur over a simple mugging, especially with a shotgun involved. The aggression of the attack suggested that it was personal. But who would want to harm Tiffany, a cherished mother and respected community member? Investigators began by questioning her ex-partners and her current boyfriend. Tiffany had been separated from her former partners, Derek Andrews and Daryl Williams, for years, and any previous conflicts had long since dissipated. Her current partner, Ben, remained a mystery since Tiffany had kept their relationship private, revealing little to friends and family. Due to this secrecy, detectives felt it necessary to question him urgently. Officers arrived at Ben's house around 5 a.m. the next morning. Despite the early hour, all the lights in the house were on, and Ben was found sitting by the front door with a shotgun. The officers ordered him to drop the weapon and raise his hands, which he complied with, insisting he was not involved in the attack. He then pleaded with the officers to protect his children, explaining that he had learned about the crime just hours earlier and was fearful that the attacker might come after him next. He felt a strong need to protect his family. During the questioning, Ben shared that in the months prior to the incident, Tiffany had told him about someone she believed was stalking her. She suspected it might be her ex-fiancé, Daryl, who was also the father of her twin daughters, Diamond and Denia. Their separation had been difficult, and they were currently engaged in a custody battle over the girls. Ben confirmed his whereabouts on Halloween night with a strong alibi. He stated that he, Tiffany, and their children had gone trick-or-treating earlier that evening. Later, he took his children to visit relatives while Tiffany and the twins intended to return to their home briefly before staying the night at his place. However, she never showed up. Almost at midnight, Tiffany's oldest son called to deliver the devastating news. Once investigators verified Ben's alibi, they released him and allowed him to go home. The focus then shifted to Daryl. Was he involved in such a violent act? Detectives were skeptical. Could he really have committed something so horrific in front of his own daughters, leaving them with lifelong trauma? On November 1st, officers visited Daryl's last known address but found that he no longer lived there. Instead, they encountered his adult daughter, who informed them that her father had moved in with his new girlfriend 6 months ago. She was visibly shaken when she heard about Tiffany's tragic death and was clearly in shock. His daughter disclosed concerning information about his short temper and controlling behavior. He was known to be domineering and would become furious when things didn't go his way. Additionally, he had a strong interest in firearms and owned a shotgun. Daryl's daughter explained that her father's breakup with Tiffany had been very contentious. He harbored deep resentment over having to pay child support and had fought hard for full custody of their twins, even though he knew he had little chance of winning. However, she noted that if Tiffany were gone, he would have had a better chance of gaining custody of the girls. Her daughter described her father as ruthless and believed he was capable of committing a crime. After speaking with her, investigators went to Daryl's workplace, a large chemical plant. His supervisor spoke highly of him, describing him as a dedicated worker who could handle the workload of 2 people and was always willing to take on extra shifts. However, Daryl's aggressive demeanor often led to conflicts with co-workers, sometimes resulting in physical confrontations. Notably, on the night of November 1st, Daryl, for the first time, refused a last-minute shift change, citing personal reasons. This unusual behavior raised further suspicions, as it left him without a confirmed alibi for the night of the crime. Detectives visited the home of Daryl's new girlfriend, Rosalind. They noticed a silver Chevrolet sedan in the driveway that matched the description of a car seen near the crime scene. When Rosalind answered the door and saw the officers, she appeared nervous. However, after learning the reason for their visit, she insisted that Daryl had stayed with her all night and had not left the house. Since there was no physical evidence to hold Daryl, the investigators decided to interview the main witnesses, Daryl and Tiffany's daughters, Diamond and Denia. They were still struggling to cope with the trauma. Denia was mostly silent, experienced nightmares, and couldn't sleep without the lights on. Diamond seemed to handle things better but would break down in tears whenever the conversation shifted to that tragic night. To help them, a skilled psychologist was brought in to gently support the sisters through their trauma, and over time, they began to share their experiences. They revealed that while staying with their father, they often saw a mysterious man delivering folders of papers to him. One day, when their father stepped out, they couldn't resist their curiosity and peeked inside the folders, discovering photos of their home, pictures of their mother in various locations around town, and even images of Ben's house. This leads them to realize that their father has employed a private investigator to follow their mother, Tiffany. Even more concerning was the fact that just 2 days before Tiffany's death, she had won full custody of the twins in court, requiring Daryl to pay child support, a situation he strongly opposed. With this new evidence, the police obtained a warrant for Daryl's arrest. Given his known history with firearms and the likelihood that he might resist, the officers decided it would be safer to arrest him at work, where security was tight, minimizing the risk of an armed confrontation. When the officers arrived, Daryl appeared shocked but did not resist arrest. He calmly allowed them to handcuff him and requested to speak with a lawyer. Initially, both he and Rosalind denied any involvement in the crime. However, investigators found phone records and GPS data showing they were both near the crime scene that night. Rosalind was the first to cooperate. In exchange for a lighter sentence, she agreed to testify against Daryl, stating that she had not known his exact intentions, she had merely driven him to the location and waited in the car. When she heard a loud noise, she panicked and drove off but slowed down to let Daryl jump in before fleeing. She claimed that she later provided him with an alibi out of fear for her own safety. Daryl faced charges of first-degree homicide, which could lead to the death penalty. In an attempt to escape this severe punishment, he tried to shift the blame. Upon learning that Rosalind had testified against him, he accused her of having an affair with his adult son and claimed that they had conspired to frame him. He was willing to implicate his own son in a serious crime to save himself. However, investigators quickly disproved his claims by thoroughly examining the evidence and confirming that his son had no involvement in the events of that night. With no alternatives available, Daryl eventually accepted a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. In April 2017, at the age of 49, he was found guilty and sentenced to 50 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after at least 25 years. One morning in September 2019, police arrived at a quiet home in Pennsylvania to check on someone who had not been responding to calls. From the outside, everything seemed normal. Both the windows were closed and the curtains were drawn, but no one answered the door. When the officers entered the house, they were unsettled by what they found: blood on the floors, towels soaked with stains, and obvious signs of violence. As they moved upstairs, they were confronted with a scene much worse than they had anticipated. Margaret Summy was born on June 28, 1952, in Pittsburgh. She grew up in her family's dance studio, a lively center of creativity that was beloved by the community. The studio was more than just a place of work, it was like a second home to her. Eventually, Margaret became a ballet instructor, helping to manage the studio and organizing beloved Christmas performances that turned into a local tradition. Her warmth and enthusiasm left a significant impact on everyone she encountered. With a magnetic personality, she always appeared polished, composed. Despite life's challenges, Margaret remained resilient and purposeful. In her early adulthood, Margaret married. Unfortunately, their relationship quickly fell apart due to his emotional unavailability and irresponsibility. After their divorce, Margaret became a single mother to 2 daughters. With no help from their father, she took on all the responsibilities of parenting while also working at the studio. Despite these challenges, she provided a loving and structured home for her daughters. Years later, Margaret met another man, a charming dentist and Harvard graduate. His charisma and apparent commitment gave Margaret the stability she had been seeking. They married in 1986, created a life filled with financial security and comfort in a well-furnished home in Pennsylvania. In 1989, they welcomed a son, David Sumney. Her husband actively participated in raising David, and he also developed a strong bond with Margaret's daughters. Although their blended family seemed to thrive on the outside, the reality inside the home was different. David was raised without boundaries. From a young age, all his wishes were immediately fulfilled, whether it was toys, vacations, or treats. As he grew older, he started demanding them, learning how to manipulate others to get what he wanted. Even simple tasks became negotiable, and he refused to do them without a reward. He had no understanding of gratitude or responsibility. His only concern was his own benefit. One particularly alarming incident occurred when he found a bird in the backyard and squeezed it to death. Margaret was horrified by his complete lack of remorse, nervously joked with family members about him potentially becoming a criminal. However, her humor masked her genuine concern. David showed no empathy or guilt. Without intervention, these troubling traits only became more pronounced as he grew older. By 2001, Margaret's marriage had quietly ended in divorce, which, while amicable, brought an end to the stability Margaret had worked so hard to achieve. Financially, the family fell apart. Her husband stopped providing support, and the dance studio that had once been central to their lives was no longer viable, forcing Margaret to close it down. With limited resources, she took a job at a clothing store to meet basic needs, a humble but necessary step. Meanwhile, David's sense of entitlement grew. Despite the family's financial struggles, he continued to expect special treatment and exhibited unchanged behavior. Even while dealing with his own financial issues, his father financially supported him at a significant personal cost, justifying it as a way to maintain their fragile bond and often giving in to his son's demands. Although Margaret and her husband no longer lived together, they remained emotionally connected, trapped in a cycle of responding to David's volatile moods. He moved easily between both homes, exploiting their desire for harmony and love. Over the years, David's influence over his parents intensified. Despite their declining finances, increasing instability, neither parent adjusted their approach. The family dynamic had shifted completely, with their lives revolving around managing their son's feelings and minimizing his outbursts. In 2008, at 19 years old, David began studying mathematics at George Washington University. His parents, who had faced many hardships, were hopeful that higher education and a structured setting would improve his behavior. Despite the high costs of housing, tuition, and living expenses, his parents supported him financially. In 2010, Margaret visited Washington, D.C. to see her son. During this visit, she called her daughter, Ellen, from a hospital, claiming that David had attempted to harm himself with a knife and that she had injured her head in the process. However, Margaret's account was inconsistent. She was evasive, defensive about the details. When Ellen arrived, she found her mother and brother in different hospital rooms, which was unusual and unexplained. The medical staff were not forthcoming with information. Ellen started to worry that David's violent behavior had escalated, possibly directed at their mother. Despite her concerns, no investigation was initiated, and the incident went unexamined. Soon after, David was expelled from the university due to ongoing absenteeism and repeated rule violations. This news devastated his parents, as all their emotional, financial, and psychological efforts had ended in another failure. David returned to Pennsylvania, shuttling between his parents' homes without showing any signs of improvement. In July 2015, 26-year-old David hit a new low in his life. He was unemployed, lacked motivation, and depended entirely on his parents. When he asked his father for a substantial amount of money for a vacation and was turned down, things escalated violently. David physically assaulted his father, viciously beating him in their home. Neighbors, disturbed by the noise, called the police. Upon arrival, the officers found David on top of his father, hitting him. His father suffered severe injuries, including brain hemorrhaging, spinal damage, and significant internal injuries. As a result, he was left unable to walk or care for himself and had to be moved to a long-term nursing facility. David was arrested at the scene and charged with aggravated assault. He was released shortly after posting bail. The father he nearly killed could no longer communicate for himself. Despite the violent attack, David faced minimal consequences. With little legal opposition and a family too shattered to resist, he walked away free, unchanged, unrepentant, more emboldened than ever. Afterward, he began telling people that he had joined the U.S. Navy. Although this story seemed odd, Margaret held on to it. For her, the idea of military service represented hope, a structured, disciplined path that could save her son from his troubled state. However, there was no evidence of any enlistment. He didn't provide any documents, wear a uniform, or answer questions about his claimed service. Every time someone asked, his responses were vague and unverifiable. At the same time, David was undergoing a physical transformation. He became obsessed with strength training, quickly gaining a lot of muscle. Now nearly 6.5 feet tall and heavily built, he appeared as intimidating as his behavior had become. As his physical strength increased, his aggression followed suit. David grew more unpredictable, volatile. Conversations with him were filled with hostility, subtle threats, and direct attempts to control those around him. He made it clear that any pushback would be met with force. Margaret, exhausted from years of fear, confusion, and love. She stayed by his side, still hoping for the return of the son she once knew. But by then, control was lost for her and the rest of the family. David was no longer just difficult or spoiled, he had become dangerous. No one seemed able or willing to stop him. In November 2016, another terrifying incident occurred at Margaret's home. Late one night, David, who was very drunk, entered her bedroom and began to strangle her while she slept. The attack was sudden and violent. Due to his large size and strength, Margaret struggled to fight back. However, she managed to break free and scream for help. David left the room without saying anything, returned to his own. Margaret then called the police. When they arrived, they found David asleep, smelling strongly of alcohol. Margaret had visible bruises, finger marks on her neck and ribs. She recounted the attack to the officers, mentioning that David had referred to a Navy SEAL reference. David was arrested, and the situation was classified as domestic violence with aggravating factors. However, Margaret intervened again. Concerned that a felony charge would jeopardize her son's future, she urged the prosecutors to lessen the charges. She argued that he was under the influence and needed rehabilitation instead of imprisonment. She also pushed the idea, though unverified, that David had served in the U.S. Navy, presenting it as a sign of his potential. Her plea was convincing enough for the court to reduce the felony charge to a lesser offense, allowing David to avoid severe punishment. During court proceedings, an official background check revealed a shocking truth: David had never served in any branch of the military. The story he had told for years was entirely false. There was no record of him being recruited, enlisted, or trained. His military persona was a deliberate lie, used to hide his failures and violent tendencies. Despite this, Margaret still believed her son could change. David received a 16-month sentence, marking his first genuine consequence. While in prison, he portrayed himself as someone struggling with addiction, rather than his aggressive behavior. He claimed that alcohol was the source of his problems, not a lack of empathy or violent impulses. This approach worked for him. A social worker supported his transfer to a rehabilitation facility instead of prison, and the court granted it. At the Pennsylvania Recovery Center, David was put under structured supervision. He participated in therapy sessions and group activities. Margaret visited regularly, bringing supplies and defending her son. She saw the rehabilitation as a potential turning point. She hoped that if he completed the program, the worst would be behind him. After finishing treatment, David moved into transitional housing, quickly got a job. Progress reports indicated that he followed the rules and showed signs of adjustment. To his hopeful family, he appeared reformed. However, this appearance was only skin deep. Beneath the good behavior was the same manipulative person. David never truly accepted responsibility for his past, never showed genuine remorse, and never acknowledged the pain he caused. By 2018, David Summey's carefully crafted image was beginning to fall apart, though not fast enough for anyone to notice. In August, his father passed away at the age of 74 in a Pennsylvania nursing home. The official cause of death was listed as age-related health issues. However, those who knew the family understood that the real reason stemmed from a severe beating he suffered in 2015 at the hands of his son. This violent act resulted in the loss of his independence, ability to work, and dignity. His health steadily declined, could not be reversed. While the family never discussed it openly, there was a shared understanding that David's attack had dramatically altered his father's identity. Throughout this time, David faced no new charges and felt no remorse. At the funeral, Margaret remained composed and did not speak out against her son, which created tension among family members. They were baffled as to why she would continue to protect someone who had caused such pain. For them, it was not just a personal tragedy, but also a systemic failure. They believed law enforcement acted too late, the courts were too lenient, and Margaret's instinct to protect may have allowed a dangerous individual to continue endangering others. In 2019, David started a new relationship using a dating app. The woman moved in with him shortly after they met. At first, he seemed to have changed for the better. He was charming, respectful, and attentive. However, this behavior didn't last long. He soon became controlling and aggressive, closely monitoring her actions, imposing strict rules in their home. She noticed something troubling. David was writing checks in the name of his mother, Margaret. He claimed that Margaret had mental health issues and that he was handling her finances, even going so far as to forge her signature when necessary. However, there was no legal documentation, such as a power of attorney or a court order, to back up his claims. When his girlfriend voiced her concerns, he dismissed them, saying there were delays with the paperwork. Although she suspected he was committing fraud, she did not have enough evidence to report him to the authorities. As their relationship deteriorated and she prepared to leave, David reacted with anger. Fearing rejection, he insisted she meet him at a hotel in Atlantic City. Once there, he became abusive. Over several days, he physically attacked her, strangled her until she lost consciousness, and kept her captive without any means to get help. At one point, believing he had killed her, he abandoned the room. She lay injured and unresponsive until a concerned housekeeper, troubled by the prolonged "do not disturb" sign, entered the room. The housekeeper discovered that she was alive, but in critical condition. She was taken to the hospital, and the police began an investigation. On July 16, 2019, an arrest warrant for David was issued, but due to a crucial mistake, the warrant wasn't entered into the federal database. This oversight allowed David to return to Pennsylvania without being identified as a fugitive. Days later, he was arrested on unrelated charges but was released because the warrant was not in the system. The protective measures designed to help the woman. The failure to communicate between agencies led to tragic outcomes. On September 1, 2019, one of Margaret's sisters tried to contact her several times, but her calls went unanswered. Worried, she contacted Margaret's eldest daughter, Ellen, who was also unable to reach her mother. By the morning of September 2, Ellen's anxiety grew as she continued trying to contact Margaret. Eventually, David answered the phone and stated that Margaret was asleep, refusing to let her speak to anyone. His tone was emotionless, which worried her. Ellen decided to contact local authorities to request a welfare check. When the police arrived at Margaret's home, everything seemed quiet. The windows were shut, and no one answered the door. After a few minutes, the officers forced their way inside and immediately sensed that something was amiss. A foul odor filled the air, Blood stains were visible in several rooms, and there were drag marks suggesting an attempt to clean up or conceal something. Upstairs, they found Margaret in the bathtub. She had been dead for over 24 hours. She suffered broken ribs, a broken spine, cuts to her face and bruising all over her body. An autopsy report concluded that Margaret Summy died from blunt force trauma and her death was declared a homicide. Blood was on the walls and floors. In the hallway, investigators discovered a sickle with what appeared to be blood on it. A revolver that belonged to Margaret was missing, leaving only its empty ammunition box behind. Forensic experts carefully analyzed the scene. The amount of blood, attempts to clean up, and the arrangement of items suggested that this was not just a violent incident, but also a well-planned one. This was not an impulsive act, it was intentional and methodical. When questioned by police, David Summy denied any involvement in his mother's death. Instead, he said it was likely an accident or a drug overdose. When detectives described Ms. Summy's injuries, David Summy suggested that his mother had been dating a man and that he should be investigated. However, when police downloaded the contents of Summy's cell phone, they found hundreds of pictures of his mother being beaten to death. Assistant District Attorney Michael Pradines said the first photo was taken at 4:50 a.m. on August 30th. Interspersed among many of the victims' photos are selfies of the defendant, in which the defendant is seen with his face covered in blood, and in one photo he is seen giving a thumbs up, the prosecutor said. Pradines said investigators also found a video on his phone recorded at 2:41 a.m. on September 1, 2019, of David Summy washing his mother's body in the bathtub. In addition to the photos, his browsing history provided incriminating information. He had searched for ways to clean blood from surfaces, how human bodies decompose, and strategies to avoid detection in homes. David conducted searches on his phone at 11:11 a.m. on August 30, 2019, including the phrase, "How long does it take before a body starts to decompose?" He had also looked up chemical odor neutralizers and information on mummification. Rather than panicking, David had planned ahead. The brutality of the crime and the calculated nature of his actions painted a psychological picture of someone without a conscience, remorse, or restraint. Investigators were certain of his guilt, but their challenge was to apprehend him. Police reached out to Ellen, the only person still occasionally in touch with David, asked for her assistance in setting a trap. She agreed. When he showed up, officers arrested him immediately. They found Margaret's checks and pieces of her jewelry among his belongings. He was formally charged with third-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, theft, and related offenses. A psychiatric evaluation determined that he was fit to stand trial. November 17, 2022, David pleaded guilty to third-degree murder, admitted his guilt, and received a sentence of 20 to 40 years in prison. With time already served, he would be eligible for parole in 2039, around his 50th birthday. David also faces another criminal case in Atlantic City, where his ex-girlfriend said he waterboarded and strangled her in a hotel room in July 2019. For Margaret's surviving relatives, this outcome felt like a betrayal. Given the horror of the crime, the photographic evidence, the forensic findings, and the digital trace, they believed he should have faced harsher charges. Margaret's daughters and sisters publicly criticized the deal and called the sentence insufficient. Ellen said, "For someone who seems to enjoy killing people, with a history of violence, he should never be out in society again." In court, David made a short statement where he expressed regret and claimed he couldn't comprehend how he committed his actions. However, his apology felt insincere. For Margaret Summy's family, this was not a moment of madness. It was the tragic culmination of a lifetime filled with manipulation, abuse, and ignored warning signs. Margaret's life ended not abruptly, but following a prolonged and preventable decline. She was not killed by a stranger, but by the very child she had always stood up for. Ellen has cut all ties with her brother, who is now a convicted murderer and no longer resembles the family member she once knew. What remains is not only profound grief but also the heavy burden of realizing that this tragedy could have been avoided. The tragic murder of Margaret Sumny is a harrowing reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked violence and systemic failures. Margaret, a loving mother, ballet teacher, and pillar of her Pennsylvania community, endured years of increasingly violent assault, manipulation, and abuse at the hands of her son, culminating in her brutal death. Despite numerous warning signs, from David's lack of empathy as a child to his violent attacks on his father and mother, the continued leniency of the legal system and Margaret's unwavering hope for redemption allowed his dangerous behavior to continue. The gruesome evidence, including photographs and videos David took during the crime, revealed a calculated and remorseless act, but his plea agreement to third-degree murder and his 20 to 40-year sentence left Margaret's family feeling betrayed by a justice system that failed to deliver proportionate consequences. This case highlights the urgent need for early intervention in cases of domestic violence, stricter enforcement of legal accountability, and increased awareness of manipulative behaviors that can escalate into tragedy. Margaret's legacy, defined by her warmth and resilience, lives on in the memories of those she touched, but her story is a wake-up call to prevent such preventable losses in the future. It was a regular afternoon at Danvers's high school. Most students had already left, and the hallways were quiet. But inside a second-floor bathroom, something terrible was happening. A well-loved teacher had just finished her last class of the day. She had no idea that one of her students was watching her. Minutes later, security cameras caught something strange, him walking out with his hood up and hands covered in blood. He moved through the school as if nothing had happened, casually talking to classmates, grabbing his things, and disappearing into the night. No one knew the dark secret he had just left behind, not yet. Philip Chisholm was born on January 21, 1999, in Tennessee. From a young age, he showed a keen interest in sports, and by the time he entered high school, he had already made a name for himself as a talented soccer player. His skills on the field were undeniable. In 2012, his teammates credited him as the driving force behind their championship win in the league. To those around him, Philip seemed like a friendly yet reserved young man. No one suspected that beneath his quiet demeanor, he was battling deep personal struggles. Philip's home life was far from stable. His father, a former military officer, had succumbed to alcoholism and frequently subjected him to both physical and emotional abuse. Heated arguments with his wife, Diana Chisholm, were a regular occurrence. By the fall of 2013, the tension had reached a breaking point. They decided to separate. Philip was uprooted from the life he knew and moved with his mother to a small town in Massachusetts, while his father relocated to Florida. As part of their divorce agreement, his father was permitted only limited visitation with Philip. Practically overnight, his world had changed completely. Adjusting to a new environment proved difficult for Philip. Already introverted, he struggled to find his place at his new school. Socializing didn't come easily to him, but over time, he began to open up. He gradually integrated into school life, even trying out for the basketball team. Though he made friends, he was selective about whom he spent time with, limiting his conversations in class to only a few people he deemed trustworthy. He stayed away from alcohol and banned substance, never drawing much attention to himself. However, beneath the surface, trouble was brewing. Philip found academics particularly challenging. Rather than engaging with his lessons, he often retreated into his own world, sketching in his notebook and listening to music instead of paying attention in class. It was during this time that Colleen Ritzer, one of the most beloved teachers at the school, noticed this new student. Known for her ability to connect with students, Colleen had dreamed of becoming a teacher from a young age. Excelling in mathematics, she pursued it as her career, earning her degree in mathematics with a specialization in secondary education, and began teaching 8th grade math that same year. Her dedication to her students was unmistakable. She frequently stayed after school to offer extra help and used social media to engage with them. When Philip arrived at the school, Colleen quickly noticed his academic struggles. Understanding that he was going through a rough time, she saw potential in him and believed he just needed some guidance to get back on track. However, unlike most of his classmates, Philip showed no interest in her efforts. On the morning of October 22, 2013, Philip arrived at Danvers's high school carrying multiple bags. Inside them were gloves, a change of clothes, a mask, and a box cutter, items that had nothing to do with schoolwork. Later that day, he attended Colleen's class. When the lesson was over, she approached him, offering to stay after class to help him prepare for an upcoming test. Philip's reaction was anything but appreciative. Instead, he erupted into an angry outburst. Colleen attempted to calm him down, but he stormed off. At around 3 p.m., Colleen went to the bathroom, unaware that Philip was closely following her. By that time, most students had left the school. Philip quietly entered the bathroom wearing gloves and holding a box cutter. Suddenly, he attacked Colleen, covering her mouth with a cloth to silence her. He overpowered her and stabbed her at least 16 times. The assault was interrupted when another student entered the bathroom. She saw Philip but assumed he was just changing for soccer practice, not realizing the violence happening nearby. She left without raising an alarm, unknowingly encountering a murderer. Then, Philip left the bathroom with his hood up and one hand covered in blood. He headed toward the school parking lot with a sinister plan to find a dumpster to dispose of the body. On his way, he casually greeted several friends, who had no idea about the horrific crime he had just committed. Soon after, he changed out of his clothes, putting on a white t-shirt and a red hoodie. With a recycling bin in hand, he returned to the bathroom. This time, he came out, made his way to the elevator and hiding his teacher's lifeless body. After leaving the school, Philip took the recycling bin to a secluded wooded area. There, he disguised Colleen's body with a tree branch and covered her remains with dry leaves. He also left a vague note that said, "I hate everyone." Acting normally, he returned to the school. Although his messy appearance should have raised concern, no one noticed anything unusual, allowing him to collect his belongings from his locker and leave without any interruptions. Philip thought he had gotten away with the perfect crime, but he was very wrong. Hours later, his mother started to worry when she realized he was missing. She went to the nearest police station to file a missing person report. At the same time, his soccer teammates noticed he wasn't at practice and began to search for him, becoming increasingly anxious. The police responded quickly and asked Philip's phone provider to track his last known location. The signal was traced to the area near Hollywood Hits Theater. Investigators went there and found that he had bought a movie ticket before disappearing. Shortly after that, his phone went offline at 9 p.m. The principal of Danvers High School emailed staff about Philip's disappearance. Shortly after, a math teacher called her with worrying news. Colleen Ritzer's parents also reported that she did not return home. This was particularly concerning because Philip had been in Colleen's last class that day, raising fears that they may have been together before they both disappeared. Colleen's parents were desperately trying to contact her, but their calls went unanswered. By around 11 p.m., they formally reported her missing. Police tracked Colleen's phone to the school area, noting the coincidence of two missing persons from the same school. This led them to investigate further. Their investigation took a troubling turn when they found Colleen's car still parked at the school, indicating something was wrong. While searching the building, they examined the second-floor bathroom and encountered a horrifying scene. Bloodstains covered the area, and Colleen's purse was left behind. A blood-spattered recycling bin was also found in the corner. Following this grim evidence, officers searched the woods behind the school and discovered blood-soaked clothing that belonged to Colleen. This evidence confirmed that a serious crime had occurred. Authorities quickly began questioning students and staff in hopes of finding witnesses. A student came forward to share an unsettling incident he had overheard between Philip and Colleen while he was organizing his locker. He noticed Philip was raising his voice at Colleen, who was trying to calm him down. The student thought Philip's anger might have been triggered by Colleen's question about his family, which unintentionally reminded him of his parents' divorce. Even though Colleen quickly moved on to a different topic, Philip continued to seem upset and began muttering to himself. The student felt that something was wrong but never thought Philip could become violent. A female student came forward with important information. She told investigators she saw the back of a person who appeared to be changing clothes. The person's rear end was exposed, with clothes piled on the floor in the bathroom that afternoon. Additionally, a mother who was picking up her child around 3:30 p.m. reported seeing Philip quickly leaving the school. This evidence suggested that something had occurred between Philip and Colleen. Detectives then reviewed the school's surveillance footage to understand the timeline of events leading up to their disappearances. The footage revealed alarming details. At 7:45 a.m., Philip arrived at school carrying several bags, which he stored in his locker. Then, at 2:54 p.m., Colleen was seen leaving a classroom and heading towards the second-floor bathroom. Just a minute later, Philip appeared in the hallway, watching her closely before briefly returning to the classroom. Moments after that, he came back into view with his hood up and followed her into the bathroom while putting on gloves. At 3:06 p.m., a female student was seen entering the bathroom and quickly exiting moments later. At 3:07 p.m., Philip left the bathroom with his hood up and walked to the parking lot. He returned 2 minutes later, now wearing a white t-shirt. After a few minutes, he was spotted again, this time in a red hoodie. At 3:16 p.m., he went back into the bathroom with a recycling bin. By 3:22 p.m., security footage showed him wearing a ski mask as he pushed the bin into the elevator. Shortly after, he was seen dragging it outside toward the student parking lot. Later that evening, Philip returned to the school, entered the bathroom again, and changed clothes. This time, he was barefoot, wearing a black hoodie. When investigators finished reviewing the footage, they were certain of one thing: Colleen had entered the bathroom but did not come out. In contrast, Philip had repeatedly entered and exited, changing his clothes each time and pushing a large bin on one occasion. Coupled with the blood evidence found in the bathroom, the conclusion was clear: Colleen had been murdered, and Philip was their main suspect. Law enforcement quickly began searching for Philip, who was still missing. They checked security footage from the school and nearby streets to see if they could find any signs of his movements. Simultaneously, they monitored Colleen Ritzer's bank account since Philip had stolen her wallet along with her credit cards, indicating he might have already used them. Their suspicions were confirmed when they found that Colleen's card had been used to buy a burger, fries, and a drink. A movie ticket was also purchased, and location data from Philip's phone showed he was at the theater shortly after the crime occurred. While police worked to find him, an unexpected turn of events happened. Around 2:30 a.m. on October 23rd, an officer in a nearby town saw a young man walking along the highway at the intersection of Route 1, North and Salem Road. It was Philip, aimlessly wandering without a clear direction. The officer recognized him from the missing person alert and stopped to ask questions. During a search, the officer found Colleen Ritzer's credit card and driver's license in Philip's possession. Additionally, his pants still had blood stains on them. He was promptly taken into custody and brought to the local police station. When officers searched Philip's backpack, they discovered Colleen's purse, her underwear, and a box cutter with dried blood on it. Alarmingly, there were also traces of semen and blood on Philip's own underwear. When interrogated about the blood, Philip coldly remarked, "It's from the girl," referring to Colleen, his teacher. He showed no remorse and proceeded to inform the police that her body was buried in the woods. At 3 a.m., a team of officers went to the wooded area behind Danvers High School. After searching for some time, they noticed a pile of leaves and debris. One officer spotted a thumb with pink nail polish sticking out from the leaves. When they removed the foliage, they were met with a horrifying scene. Colleen's lifeless body was lying on her back, her throat cut, and a tree branch had violated her remains. Her face and body showed signs of severe trauma. Nearby, officers found a pair of blood-soaked white gloves and a handwritten note that stated, "I hate everyone." Colleen's remains were quickly taken for forensic examination. The autopsy revealed she had suffered 16 stab wounds and had been assaulted twice. Philip was immediately charged with aggravated assault, armed robbery, and first-degree murder. He was held without bail. That morning, on October 23rd, police visited Philip's mother at her new apartment, which she had moved into after leaving Tennessee due to her divorce. She appeared very upset and acknowledged that the separation had been hard for both her and Philip. Later, through his attorney, she released a statement offering her condolences to Colleen's family. In contrast, Philip's uncle took a different view. He suggested that something must have triggered his nephew's actions, arguing that teenagers can be quick to anger and noted that Philip was only 14 years old. He characterized Philip as a well-behaved child from a good family, seemingly minimizing the seriousness of the situation. Philip's former soccer coach shared similar feelings, saying he wanted to learn the full story before judging the teenager. Meanwhile, a student, Rania Ridui, found it hard to comprehend the tragedy. She couldn't understand why anyone would hurt Colleen, who she described as kind and caring. Colleen's family was heartbroken and in deep mourning. On October 28, 2013, the community came together to pay their respects at her funeral at St. Augustine Church. The service was very emotional and attended by nearly 1,000 people, including 400 of Colleen's students from Danvers High School, many of whom wore pink, her favorite color. The entrance to the church was decorated with pink flowers, symbolizing the love and admiration she inspired in those who knew her. Colleen's cousin spoke passionately about the large turnout at Colleen's funeral, which highlighted the significant impact she had on her community. She noted that even though Colleen had a brief life, she made a lasting impression on education, inspiring many students with her dedication and love for teaching. She also emphasized Colleen's strong bond with her siblings, her commitment to being a supportive friend and mentor. With deep sorrow and respect, Colleen's cousin described Colleen as the ideal person any parent would wish for their child to become. The Reverend provided words of comfort, encouraging attendees to focus on the meaningful life Colleen led rather than the tragic way it ended. His message resonated with those grieving, reminding them to celebrate the positivity Colleen brought to the world. Months later, at a juvenile detention center in Boston, Philip committed another crime. On June 2, 2014, he entered a staff locker room bathroom and tried to strangle a 29-year-old medical staff member and attack her with a pencil. It took several employees to restrain him while he screamed threats, including, "I'm going to kill all of you." Although he didn't succeed in killing her, she was left seriously injured. A new case was opened against him, but he was still facing charges for the murder of Colleen Ritzer before going to trial for this attack. Philip's defense attorney admitted that he had killed the teacher but argued that he should not be held criminally responsible. She claimed he was experiencing a psychotic episode and suffering from severe mental illness at the time of the murder, even stating that he had heard voices beforehand. The prosecutor strongly disagreed, asserting that Philip did not have any mental illness and presented surveillance footage as evidence. The videos showed him carefully following Colleen into the bathroom, attacking her, and then coldly placing her body into a recycling bin before wheeling it outside. The prosecutor also highlighted that after the murder, Philip casually greeted friends, ate a meal, and watched a movie while carrying evidence of his crime in his backpack. After considering the prosecution's argument, the court rejected the defense's claim of criminal insanity, ruling that Philip was mentally competent to stand trial. Since the minimum age for criminal prosecution in the United States is 14, he could be tried as an adult. On December 15, 2015, a jury found Philip guilty of first-degree murder, aggravated assault, and armed robbery. As the judge read the verdict, Philip stood silently, his hands cuffed and his expression blank. Colleen's mother, heartbroken by his lack of remorse, declared that Philip was truly evil and beyond rehabilitation. "Their family will never get a second chance with Colleen, and he shouldn't get one either," she said. Despite these emotional statements, Philip showed no reaction. He did not flinch or show any empathy or regret for the life he had taken or the family he had devastated. On February 26, 2016, despite the defense team arguing that Philip was mentally ill, he was convicted of killing Colleen Ritzer and sentenced to 40 to 60 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 40 years, a sentence that Colleen's family felt was not harsh enough. However, this was not his last sentencing. On April 26, 2024, a decade later, he faced trial again for attempting to murder a medical worker at the Boston Juvenile Facility. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense as his attorney declared that Philip wanted to take full responsibility and resolve the case quickly. Despite this, it was evident to everyone that he lacked genuine remorse. The medical worker he attacked described him as a monster and a remorseless killer. She recounted the terrifying incident, stating that he intended to kill her. During her testimony, she revealed that his face still haunted her as a constant reminder of the trauma he caused. She pleaded with the court to keep Philip in prison for life, so no one else would suffer at his hands. Ultimately, the judge sentenced Philip to an additional 17 to 20 years for the attack, to be served concurrently with his original sentence for Colleen's murder. To this day, Philip remains in prison, serving time for the crimes he committed against two women who only tried to help him, but were met with unimaginable violence instead. Colleen's family chose to celebrate her memory instead of focusing on their sorrow after her tragic death. 1 year following her murder, they created a scholarship in her honor. In a public statement, they remembered Colleen as a kind and caring young woman whose love for teaching defined her life. They take comfort in knowing that her legacy lives on. Many students who have received the scholarship are pursuing teaching careers, inspired by Colleen's dedication and passion for education. Although she is no longer, her influence remains strong in the classrooms and hearts of those who knew her. In October 2024, Chisholm's attorneys appealed to the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court, arguing that brain scan evidence of mental illness had been wrongly excluded. On February 25, 2025, the SJC denied a new trial, upholding Chisholm's conviction and 40-year parole. Ritzer's family expressed relief, stating the ruling allowed them to grieve without appeal uncertainties. The brutal murder of Colleen Ritzer at Danvers High School left an indelible scar on her family, students, and community, shattering the illusion of safety in a place meant for learning. Yet, from this tragedy, Colleen's radiant legacy endures through the scholarship bearing her name, inspiring future educators to carry forward her passion and kindness. Philip Chisholm, whose cold indifference and violent acts stole a beloved teacher's life, remains behind bars, his 2025 appeal denial ensuring accountability for his crimes. As Danvers continues to heal, the memory of Colleen, her infectious smile, unwavering dedication, and boundless compassion, lives on, a beacon of light that no darkness can extinguish. Shanti Cooper was a devoted mother to her son, Jackson, 8, who she shared custody of with her ex-husband, Jim Cooper. After separating from Jim in 2013, Shanti was ready to begin dating again. She quickly realized that online dating had become the common way to meet people, so she decided to give it a try by creating a chat account. While exploring different profiles on the site, Shanti connected with a few men, but none impressed her quite like David Trance. David had also recently ended a year-long marriage, was looking for something fresh and exciting. Their relationship deepened through phone calls, text messages, and emails. After several months of getting to know each other, David made a significant decision to move to Orlando, Florida, to be closer to Shanti. Their relationship evolved into something more intimate, while Shanti remained committed to her son. She made sure that her time with David didn't compromise her responsibilities as a mother, always putting Jackson's well-being first and ensuring that everyone understood the importance of a healthy family dynamic. In 2015, Shanti and David relocated to Delaney Park, an upscale suburb close to downtown Orlando. This neighborhood is known for its beautiful environment and family-friendly atmosphere, attracting an affluent community. Delaney Park offers a high-quality lifestyle along with an excellent school system that delivers quality education. Its well-maintained landscapes and access to various amenities make it an attractive choice for families looking for a comfortable and safe home. In here, David bought a house for $600,000 in cash. The home is 4,000 square feet, featuring a pool, a garage, and an apartment above it. This spacious property offered them a comfortable living space with plenty of amenities. Shanti and David were excited to settle into their new house and start a new chapter in their lives. However, they soon noticed that some features of the home did not meet their expectations for the future. While they loved their new house, the upstairs bedrooms felt small and were not very functional. Facing this challenge, David and Shanti began a renovation project to turn their house into their dream home. Shanti, passionate about design and home improvement, agreed to fund the project. They hired a skilled team of contractors who completely dismantled the house to rebuild the upstairs bedrooms and create a new layout that met their vision. During the renovation, the bedrooms were unusable, so Shanti moved into the apartment above the garage. This arrangement allowed her to maintain her daily routine without interruption and provided a dedicated workspace. David, on the other hand, stayed in a makeshift area in the garage, spending quality time with their dogs. David became deeply invested in the restoration. It was no longer just a project but a vital part of his life. He spent every waking moment monitoring the work, making adjustments, ensuring every detail was carefully planned and executed. His entire focus was on the renovation, and the house began to take on a character of its own. In 2018, 3 years after starting the renovation project, there was barely any progress. The inside of the house had been completely stripped down, leaving only the bare structure. Seeking a solution, David reached out to a local home renovator known from the successful A&E reality show, Zombie House Flipping. This show features real estate investors who buy and renovate rundown homes. The show's producer contacted David and Shanti about their home in Delaney Park to see if it could be included in the next season. During the chaos of their home renovations, David and Shanti got married in 2017, which surprised many friends and family. Shanti, who is naturally private, even kept the marriage a secret from her beloved grandmother. By mid-April 2018, the show Zombie House Flipping planned to start filming at David and Shanti's home in May. However, the producer struggled to get them to discuss how the show would proceed. The producer noticed a clear contrast between David's excitement and Shanti's apparent disinterest. David was eager about the flipping series, while Shanti seemed to participate just to support her husband. The tension over their home was evident, as Shanti had invested a lot of money in the renovations, yet her name wasn't even on the trust that owned the house. Although David promised to include Shanti on the trust, he did not follow through, leading to further issues in their relationship. By the end of April 2018, David and Shanti seemed to be doing well. However, on April 24, 2018, at 3:51 p.m., David called 911 in a panic, saying he had found his wife, Shanti, in the bathtub and that she wasn't breathing. During the call, David's screams were audible as he desperately tried to explain the situation. When the police arrived at their home, they discovered Shanti had passed away in the bathtub. The area was secured, and an investigation began, while David was taken to the police station for questioning. David recounted to investigators that the morning had started normally. He said Shanti woke up between 7 and 7:30 a.m. At around 9:30 a.m., he left for a 1-hour walk, leaving Shanti at home. When he returned, he claimed he took measurements for renovations. After that, David stated he left again around noon to take their dogs to an off-leash dog park near the Orlando Executive Airport. He mentioned that he frequently visited this park to let the dogs play and enjoy the open space. He added that he hadn't spoken to Shanti before leaving the house and assumed she was in the garage apartment relaxing. David told the detectives that after returning home from the dog park, he went outside to do yard work. He worked for about 30 minutes before deciding to go inside. Once inside, he heard water coming from the bathroom, which intrigued him, so he went to check it out. As he approached, he noticed that the bathroom door was slightly open. When he pushed it open, he was shocked to find his wife, Shanti, unconscious in the bathtub, with her body partially submerged in water. In a panic, he called 911 to report what he had found. During the interview, David mentioned that Shanti had been excited about their future and the plans they had for their home. They were both looking forward to a happy life together. Although David seemed distraught and his account of finding Shanti appeared credible, the detective had doubts. There were inconsistencies in his story that raised concerns. When police officers arrived at Trant's home after David's call, they noticed that the bathroom was completely dry, which would be unusual if David had genuinely tried to save his wife from a bathtub filled with water. This detail cast doubt on the truth of David's account. The extent of Shanti's injuries contradicted David's explanation of how she fell into the tub. When her body was examined at the crime scene, it was clear she had extensive blood and bruises that couldn't be attributed to just a fall. An autopsy determined that Shanti died from blunt force trauma and strangulation, marking her death as a homicide. These inconsistencies led the detective to question David about the differences in his account. The detective questioned David about the blood found on Shanti's bed. David claimed it was from her menstrual cycle, but the amount discovered was puzzling and raised more doubts. The detectives explored various theories about why David might have killed Shanti. To provoke a response from David, the detective inquired if their ongoing home renovations had anything to do with Shanti's death, but David denied any connection. The detective also asked if Shanti was upset with David because her name was not on the house title. David insisted that Shanti had no problem with that. The detective began to suspect that Shanti's death might be linked to her life insurance policy, which would pay out $250,000 to David. During the interview, detectives asked David whether Shanti's death was an accident related to rough intercourse. He denied harming her in any way. Despite his denial, the detectives believed there was enough evidence to implicate him in Shanti's murder. They thought he had pretended to cry during the 911 call and the interview to divert suspicion. However, before David left the police station, he agreed to take a polygraph test. It was late at night, and the detectives couldn't find a polygrapher to conduct the test right away, so they allowed David to go home. Before he left, he provided DNA samples, nail clippings, and fingerprints to the detectives for analysis and comparison with evidence from the crime scene. The detectives hoped these samples would help them find more evidence linking David to Shanti's murder. Investigators who looked into the crime scene at David and Shanti's home found several notable details. Shanti had one earring still on and another on her nightstand, along with her watch, which was also found on the nightstand at the time of her murder. These details were important to the detectives because they indicated that Shanti might have been getting ready for bed when she was attacked. Additionally, her cell phone was on the nightstand, but there had been no activity on it after 11:30 p.m. on April 23, 2018. The medical examiner's report showed that Shanti had no defensive wounds, suggesting she was caught off guard by the attack. Detectives theorized that Shanti was sitting on the edge of her bed, taking off her jewelry when David attacked her from behind, leading to her death. They believed David then moved her body into the bathtub. Another important discovery was that nothing seemed to have been stolen from the house, leading the detectives to rule out robbery as a motive. However, Shanti's $155,000 engagement ring was missing. As the investigation progressed, detectives found that David's description of his happy marriage with Shanti clashed with what others believed about their relationship. David often hid Jackson's toys and only returned them when Jackson asked for them. The detectives suspected that David was using these tactics to manipulate both Shanti and her son. While searching the garage where David was sleeping, they found an unplugged refrigerator filled with children's toys. This finding reinforced the detectives' belief that David was engaged in manipulative behavior by intermittently hiding Jackson's toys. David appeared to be trying to control the emotions of Shanti and her son. After detectives executed a search warrant at Shanti and David's home, they seized the couple's computers. On Shanti's computer, they discovered notes revealing her dissatisfaction with her marriage to David. In these notes, Shanti described David as cheap, controlling, and narcissistic. She wrote that he never paid when they went out to eat, and on the rare occasions he did, he would make excuses, claiming he forgot his wallet. Shanti shared feelings of sadness and loneliness, expressing her fear. She desired to no longer be part of their life together. She indicated that her mental unhappiness was largely due to her difficult interactions with David. Additionally, the notes showed that living in a house under construction added significant stress to her life. As the detectives investigated Shanti's murder, they uncovered significant information linking David to her death. It was found that Shanti had been hospitalized for 3 days prior to her body being discovered. The detectives learned that she had expressed worries about her eating habits, telling her nanny that she could no longer tolerate spicy foods or drink alcohol. Furthermore, Shanti was experiencing rapid weight loss, which raised more suspicion among the investigators. They were confused by the toxicology tests conducted during her autopsy, which did not reveal any toxic substances in her body. Despite the lack of evidence, they began to suspect that David might have been poisoning Shanti, but they were uncertain about the specific substance responsible, as nothing was detected in the tests. David had been married before he wed Shanti, which prompted detectives to investigate his previous marriage. They found out that his first wife, Carol, suffered from health problems similar to Shanti's. David met Carol on a blind date in 1997, and they married 2 years later. The detectives were concerned about a possible link between Carol's health issues and Shanti's rapid decline in health. Shortly after their marriage, Carol began facing various health challenges, including persistent nausea, fainting spells, severe reactions to spicy foods and alcohol. Some of her close friends suggested to the detectives that David might have started poisoning her after they got married. To learn more about David's past, the detectives traveled from Florida to Minnesota in November 2018 to interview Carol in person. During the recorded interview, Carol described her struggles with chronic pain and immune system problems that remained undiagnosed. She stressed the need to understand her background to grasp the context of her health issues and mentioned that David was the one who cooked their meals during their marriage. The detectives asked Carol about the possibility that David was involved in her health issues, noting it was suspicious that both of his ex-wives faced similar health problems. Carol firmly denied any suggestion that her ex-husband had poisoned her, stating that her health issues continued even after they separated. During the investigation into Shanti's murder, detectives received a call from an employee at Club Orlando, a private men's spa. The club provided amenities like hot tubs, pools, a gym, and dark rooms for intimate activities. To become a member, individuals needed to buy a pass or membership. The employee informed the detectives that David had multiple memberships at Club Orlando and renewed them every 6 months without exception. He claimed to have seen David engaged in intimate activities with other men. Conversations with Shanti's friends revealed that she would never accept her husband having same intimate relationships. This raised the question of whether Shanti had discovered David's actions and threatened to leave him. As the investigation progressed, the detectives thoroughly reviewed all evidence, including information from an employee at Club Orlando. They sought to find out if David's spa membership and the reported intimate activity could shed light on Shanti's death. When the forensic results arrived from the state crime lab, they revealed Shanti's DNA under David's fingernails and his fingerprints were the only ones found in the bathtub. This evidence contradicted David's story, in which he stated that Shanti had accidentally fallen while entering the tub. The detectives had anticipated finding Shanti's fingerprints in the tub as well, but they were absent. On August 29, 2018, David was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, and he was denied bail. His friends were shocked by the news, as they found it hard to believe he could be responsible for Shanti's murder. They suspected that the police were looking for an easy resolution and not thoroughly investigating to find the true culprit. However, the detectives carried out a detailed investigation, following all leads regarding Shanti's murder before making the arrest. Additionally, the detectives considered Shanti's ex-husband, Jim Cooper, as a potential suspect due to their rocky divorce, which raised concerns about whether Jim might have harmed Shanti. After interviewing Jim, the detectives were able to eliminate him as a suspect based on his alibi. After David was arrested, police searched his mother's home in Orlando, where he had been living. In a suitcase, they found Shanti's missing engagement ring, which had gone missing the night she was murdered. This discovery strengthened their case against David. On April 18, 2019, almost a year after Shanti's murder, prosecutor Ryan Vecchio was meeting with Orlando Police Inspector Teresa Sprague when David's attorney called. At the time, David was represented by Robert Mandel, who called after receiving Sprague's investigative report. After some deliberation, Robert Mandel informed him that he had hired private investigator Billy Lane from Prison Break Investigations to investigate the case and that he had some papers in his home. ASA Vecchio asked him where these papers came from and Robert informed him that they were taken from the loft apartment David was staying in at the time of the murder and that the police had missed them. He informed him that these papers had been packaged as evidence and kept by Billy Lane at his office in Lakeland and that they planned to test the blood and DNA at some point. They had now kept these papers for 11 months without revealing them. Inside the brown evidence bag, which was marked and labeled, were bed sheets, a fitted sheet, a pillowcase, and a pair of black socks. Police also found a green cord collected from the Trance home that had been found wrapped around a wooden beam from a ladder. Although the strangulation marks were not easily visible, Shanti had an unusual linear cut on the right side of her neck with possible strangulation marks on both sides. Using gloves and magnifying glasses, investigators examined the entire cord for evidence of blood but found nothing that could be seen with the naked eye or under a magnifying glass. In July 2019, a jailhouse informant came forward with important details about a confession from David. The informant said that Shanti had found text messages on David's phone that exposed his intimate relationships with multiple men. This led to a heated argument where Shanti expressed her anger, threatened to expose him, and demanded a divorce. The informant claimed that David admitted to blacking out before he hit Shanti, which ultimately caused her death. Additionally, the informant stated he had known David before being incarcerated and had seen him at Club Orlando. He also revealed that David mentioned cambo, a toxic secretion from an Amazonian giant monkey frog used in controversial treatments. David had allegedly told the informant that this substance could be a poison that kills without leaving traces in a toxicology report. David's trial was postponed due to the global issue, which affected many legal proceedings across the country. As a result, there were significant delays in his case, lasting almost 2 years. Finally, in 2022, the trial began. However, it took an unexpected turn when both the defense and prosecution's medical experts evaluated David, determined that he was not competent to stand trial, concluding that he was experiencing severe symptoms of schizophrenia. In October 2023, after a 6-day trial, a jury found David Trance guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison. Shanti's son, Jackson, now lives with her ex-husband, Jim Cooper. Shanti, a devoted mother and woman searching for love, stability after a difficult divorce, fell victim to David Trance's manipulative and violent betrayal. Her death at their Delaney Park home, amid a stalled renovation that symbolized the breakdown of their marriage, underscored the dangers of broken promises and hidden motives. David's sentencing in October 2023 brought justice, but it did not erase the pain endured by Shanti's son, Jackson, and her loved ones. Being gullible can be dangerous, sometimes even life-threatening. We all have moments when we wish to believe in miracles, feel that dreams might still be within reach. When something you've wished for seems almost attainable, it's easy to let caution and common sense slip away. Criminals often take advantage of this vulnerability. The case of Elodie Morel, a young French woman, in 2005 shocked the nation due to its brutality and inhumanity. What made it even more disturbing was the indifference shown by ordinary people who were aware of her situation but chose to remain silent for their own gain. This story reminds us that not all dreams come true and highlights the importance of being cautious about whom you trust, especially when they promise a fairy tale ending. Elodie Morel was born on 1976, in Marseille. From a young age, she had a strikingly beautiful appearance. As she grew older, Elodie developed into an even more stunning woman, with many people believing she should be on television or magazine covers. As a teenager, she dreamed of being a model, but coming from a modest background, few took her aspirations seriously. In the 1990s, Elodie submitted her photos to various modeling agencies several times but never received any replies. After finishing high school, she attended college, married a classmate named Sylvain at 22, and had a son by 25. It appeared she had abandoned her modeling dreams permanently. By 2005, Elodie worked as a sales associate at a trendy clothing store in downtown Marseille. She often received compliments and noticed people admiring or envying her looks. At 29, she maintained a perfect figure and beautiful features, easily appearing to be in her early 20s. Though Elodie never completely gave up on her modeling aspirations, she stopped discussing them, believing her time had passed. In April 2005, Elodie filled out an online application, submitted her best photos, and expressed her desire to pursue a modeling career. She soon received a reply, but what seemed like a promising opportunity from a fashion photographer turned out to be a dangerous trap. About 2 weeks after posting her profile, Elodie received an enticing offer to become the new face of the prestigious English luxury car company, Rolls-Royce. The contract promised €1,000 per day for a photo shoot, but to secure the deal, she needed to meet the photographer for a test shoot. The meeting was scheduled for May 2nd at a bar in Aigues-Mortes. Excited, Elodie shared the news with her husband, who was doubtful but didn't voice his concerns. That morning, she left her son with her parents, got into her car, and drove to the meeting location. She planned to stay in Aigues-Mortes for 3 days and had already booked a hotel room. Later that evening, Elodie called her husband to update him on her progress and mentioned she was feeling nervous. Sylvain wished her luck, told her to call him as soon as she could. This would be the last conversation he had with his wife. When Elodie arrived at the bar as planned, she sat at a table on the terrace, waiting to meet the female photographer she believed she had been emailing. However, about 10 minutes later, a man in his mid-40s approached her. He introduced himself as the photographer's assistant, explained that he was there to meet her and scout locations for the photo shoot scheduled for the next day. Since Elodie had little experience in the modeling industry, she didn't find anything suspicious about him, took him at his word. The man appeared professional, spoke confidently, and seemed knowledgeable about her prior conversations with the photographer. Their conversation flowed easily and revolved around Elodie's potential career. She began to imagine herself on the covers of popular magazines, daydreamed about how she would spend the money she would earn. Around 9 p.m., as night fell, the man proposed they look for the ideal spot for the next day's photo shoot. Aigues-Mortes, a beautiful medieval town, is filled with scenic towers, fortresses, and chapels, perfect locations for taking stunning pictures. Excited and unaware of any danger, Elodie left the bar with her new acquaintance and got into his car. Tragically, she was never seen alive again. What is particularly unsettling is that a man who knew the suspect and was aware of his malicious intentions witnessed the entire encounter. He tried to step in, but his efforts were futile. That same night, on May 2nd, a call came into the Aigues-Mortes police station. A panicked man reported that a young woman was in serious danger and that immediate action was needed. He did not know the victim's name or her location, but he was convinced time was running out. The caller was 63-year-old Dominique Tarasco, a nightclub owner who frequently provided the police with confidential information. He stated that earlier that night, he had seen his acquaintance, Guillaume Mingaud, at the bar. Guillaume had connections to the criminal underworld and was notorious for his violent behavior. The day before, he had boasted about meeting a naive, attractive girl online whom he intended to abduct and sell to a brothel in Spain for a substantial profit. Starting the search for Elodie Morel was challenging because the police had no solid leads, names, or locations. They knew that finding her quickly was crucial. By the next morning, they learned her name when her worried family reached out, reporting that she had been missing since the previous evening and that her phone was turned off. They explained that she had left for a photo shoot in another town and then disappeared. Initially, the police did not link her disappearance to the family's report. They thought she might have run away with a romantic partner. However, her family stressed that she would never leave her young son or vanish without a message. The search for Elodie did not officially start until 3 days after she went missing, which wasted valuable time. Tragically, during those 2 days, Elodie was still alive, being held captive in a house in Vergès where she suffered torture and abuse as her captors decided what to do with her. On May 5, 2005, the lead investigator in Aigues-Mortes' missing person case began to suspect that she was the endangered woman mentioned by an informant. Dominique Tarasco was called to the police station to provide a formal statement. When shown a photo of Elodie, he immediately confirmed that she was the woman he had seen 3 days earlier in a bar with Guillaume. When asked where he thought Guillaume might have taken Elodie, Dominique recalled hearing about an empty nightclub on the north side of town that had recently closed down. A police team conducted a surveillance operation at that location, and by that evening, they arrested 48-year-old Guillaume and 53-year-old Richard as they arrived at the nightclub. The exact role of Richard in this case remained unclear and needed further investigation. During a search of Guillaume, police discovered Elodie Morel's credit card in one of Guillaume's pockets, which confirmed his involvement in her disappearance. Both men were taken to the station for questioning, but Richard was released a few hours later due to insufficient evidence against him. Richard lived with his family on the outskirts of town and had a friendly relationship with Guillaume, but he had no prior legal issues. Guillaume initially claimed he didn't know Elodie and that he had just stolen her credit card. In his first account, he said that on May 2nd, while at a bar, he spotted an attractive, well-dressed woman and assumed she had money. He decided to rob her. Guillaume approached Elodie's table, gave her a compliment, and offered to buy her a coffee. Although she stated she was waiting for someone, she didn't tell him to leave. They engaged in a brief conversation, during which he managed to take her credit card from her purse that was hanging on her chair, leaving before she realized it was gone. Guillaume insisted that the entire incident was spontaneous. He claimed he only stole her card and had no involvement in her disappearance. Investigators found that he used the stolen card the same day to withdraw cash from an ATM located on the outskirts of town. However, he could not explain how he knew the PIN, which made his story seem unreliable. Additionally, a background check revealed that Guillaume had a criminal history with multiple convictions, including armed robbery, banned substance trafficking, and a 9-year prison sentence for a violent abuse. Despite being released from prison, Guillaume had not changed his behavior. Instead, he had become more cautious to avoid returning to jail. The situation worsened for Guillaume when police discovered Elodie's phone number in his phone, along with their email exchanges regarding a photo shoot. This evidence contradicted his initial account and forced him to change his story. He admitted that he found Elodie's modeling profile online and began messaging her while pretending to be a photographer. Elodie, being trusting and eager, quickly agreed to meet him without much skepticism. Guillaume had been using a female alias to communicate with her, which made him nervous that she might become suspicious when a man showed up instead of the expected photographer. Nevertheless, Elodie saw nothing unusual and willingly went with him late at night to check out possible locations for the photo shoot, even getting into his car without hesitation, a fact later confirmed by witnesses. After driving to a remote location, Guillaume left the main road and stopped the car. He pulled out a gun and demanded that Elodie give him her credit card. When she refused, he took her purse and found the card himself. He then insisted on getting the PIN, but Elodie still wouldn't provide it. Angered, he slammed her head against the dashboard, choked her until she finally gave in and revealed the code. After that, he locked Elodie in the trunk and went to the nearest ATM to check if she was telling the truth. The PIN worked, and he emptied her account. With the money in his possession, he started thinking about what to do next with the woman locked in his trunk. Feeling the need for time to figure things out, Guillaume drove to his friend Richard's house to hide Elodie for a while. He told Richard about the woman in his trunk, mentioned that he planned to sell her for a significant profit, which he was willing to share with Richard. It's worth noting that Richard and his wife once worked at the same nightclub. He is a security guard and she is a cleaner. After the nightclub closed, they both lost their jobs and were struggling to get by, leading Richard to begin drinking heavily. Richard agreed to help Guillaume by giving him the keys to his empty garage, suggesting it as a place to keep the woman. He wanted to avoid any direct interaction with her and preferred to let Guillaume handle things, hoping to receive a share of the money. Later investigations found that Elodie had been held captive for more than 2 days, during which she suffered severe torture, assault, beatings, and severe hunger and thirst. Guillaume reported that he and Elodie spent a lot of time talking about their children, who were of similar ages. Elodie pleaded for her release, arguing that her son needed her. Guillaume admitted that he felt some sympathy for her and briefly considered letting her go. He even brought her a bottle of water because the garage was extremely hot and she had been there for 2 days. However, on the night of May 4th, everything changed when Richard, heavily intoxicated, decided to confront Elodie. Guillaume claimed that while he was away, Richard entered the garage and strangled Elodie with a rope. Guillaume maintained that he did not take part in the actual murder and only helped to hide her body. However, he would not disclose the location of her remains. During the police search of the Lignier residence, they seemed nervous but not particularly shocked. They allowed the officers to enter without resistance and continued eating at the kitchen table, showing little concern for the search. The police discovered several items belonging to Elodie in their teenage daughter's room, such as her cell phone, jewelry, a hair clip, and a wristwatch. Additionally, Elodie's purse and wallet were found with Richard's wife. Other items, including torn pieces of the victim's clothing, were found in the trash bin outside the house. More alarming evidence was revealed in Richard's garage. Investigators found dried brown stains that looked like blood, along with crumpled tissues, cigarette butts, an empty plastic bottle, and a piece of rope. Both Richard and his wife, Francine, were arrested, while their 14-year-old daughter was temporarily placed with relatives. When asked how Elodie's belongings came to be in their home, they explained that Guillaume had brought them in exchange for using their garage. They acknowledged knowing that he was holding a woman there but chose not to intervene because he had promised to reward them. They also admitted to giving him a bottle of water and a piece of rope when he asked, without questioning his motives. Forensic evidence showed that the brown stains on the garage floor were Elodie's blood. Additionally, DNA found on crumpled tissues matched Guillaume's. Saliva found on cigarette butts belonged to both Elodie and Guillaume. Elodie's family asserted that she had never smoked due to her asthma, which caused her to have severe coughing and choking fits when exposed to cigarette smoke. The chilling reality emerged. Guillaume had kept Elodie in the garage for 2 days, repeatedly assaulting and likely torturing her, forcing her to smoke as part of his abuse. Guillaume changed his story after the investigators revealed the forensic evidence. He admitted that he and Elodie had been intimate in the garage, but insisted it was consensual. He claimed they had smoked together and talked a lot before he decided to let her go. However, he still maintained that Richard Lignier had killed her while he was away, supposedly because Richard feared Elodie might go to the police after he released her. This explanation raised many inconsistencies, the most significant being that Richard had no motive to kill Elodie. First, he had never met her, and she had never seen him or any of his family members. Second, Elodie had been brought to the garage in the trunk of a car, meaning she wouldn't have known where she was and couldn't lead the police there. Lastly, Richard was just an ordinary drunk, unable to physically harm anyone. He was satisfied with receiving payment in the form of Elodie's belongings and a promise of money from his friend once the situation was resolved. Earlier, investigators discovered an empty plastic water bottle in the garage. Guillaume claimed he felt sorry for Elodie and brought her water, but tests revealed that the liquid contained high levels of potent drugs. After consuming these drugs, Elodie would have likely been unconscious or barely aware, giving Guillaume the opportunity to do as he pleased. When questioned about why he drugged her, Guillaume changed his story again. He now said he was prepared to set her free and that they had agreed she wouldn't go to the police. He claimed Elodie wanted to return home to her family and forget the incident, as if it were just a bad dream. However, he asserted that she attempted to escape, which resulted in a struggle during which he hit her, explaining the blood stains found on the garage floor. He then locked her inside and left. Guillaume stated he drugged Elodie to calm her and prevent her from trying to escape again. He crushed some pills, dissolved them in water, and then departed, returning 12 hours later. By that time, Elodie was severely dehydrated. She quickly drank the water without noticing its odd taste and passed out within minutes. Guillaume claimed she accidentally overdosed because her weakened body couldn't handle the drugs. Realizing she had stopped breathing, he put her body in the trunk of her car, which he had left in a parking lot near the bar where they first met. Later, he drove the car to Richard's property using the keys he had taken from her. Although Guillaume refused to disclose where he took the car with Elodie's body, his account had numerous inconsistencies. Notably, a rope found in the garage contained sweat and skin cells from both Elodie and Guillaume, suggesting he likely strangled her. All the evidence was stacked against him, and he was aware of it. To reduce his sentence, Guillaume struck a deal with investigators, confessing that he had left the car near the old cemetery in Aigues-Mortes. The police found the vehicle on May 6, exactly where he indicated. It had been exposed to the sun for 3 days, and the body in the trunk was already decomposing. The autopsy revealed clear signs of torture, beatings, and strangulation. The victim had been tied up, drugged, assaulted, and ultimately strangled to death with a rope. The trial for the 3 individuals involved in the crime began in February 2008, nearly 3 years after the shocking events. Guillaume Mingaud was sentenced to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 22 years. Richard Lignier and his wife attempted to persuade the jury that they had no knowledge of the captive in their garage. They claimed they had merely let an old friend stay with them for a few days without asking questions. However, the discovery of the victims' belongings in their home contradicted their story. Ligniers was charged with aiding and abetting. In 2010, each received a 6-year prison sentence. Guillaume and his lawyer appealed the court's decision, attempting to place some of the blame for the crime on the Ligonier. This was their only chance to lessen his life sentence and reduce the minimum time he would have to serve. On May 3, 2010, exactly 5 years after Elodie Morel's murder, the new trial began. During the proceedings, it was revealed that Richard and Francine were aware of Elodie's captivity and the serious danger she faced, yet they took no action. Not only did they keep her belongings and give some to their daughter, but they also supplied Guillaume with everything he requested, such as rope and water, without questioning his motives or considering the consequences. Ultimately, the court reduced Guillaume Mingaud's life sentence to 30 years, requiring him to serve 2/3 of that time before he could be eligible for parole. Richard and Francine Ligonier, due to their complicity and inaction, were each sentenced to 8 years in prison with no chance for early release. The tragic case of Elodie Morel serves as a harrowing reminder of the perils of unchecked trust and the devastating consequences of bystander indifference. Her dream of a modeling career, pursued with Rosa with hope, was cruelly exploited by Guillaume Mingaud, whose deceit led to her brutal torture and murder. Equally disturbing is the complicity of Richard and Francine Ligonier, who prioritized personal gain over human life, allowing Elodie's suffering to continue in their garage. This case underscores the critical need for vigilance in the face of enticing promises and the moral imperative to act against injustice. Elodie's story, etched into France's collective memory, calls us to honor her by fostering skepticism, compassion, and courage to prevent such tragedies from recurring. Many people do not recognize that the person in front of them is actually dangerous rather than loving. Unfortunately, not everyone has the opportunity to correct their mistakes. History tends to repeat itself, including its darkest moments. In today's story, we will discuss a significant betrayal that led to one of the most brutal and senseless crimes in Alaska's history, driven by greed and foolishness. This tragic event took place in Anchorage, Alaska. Interestingly, although the overall crime rate in the U.S. has been declining, Anchorage is an exception, with violent crime rates being 60% higher than the national average. Statistics show that even women in this area commit violent crimes more frequently, usually targeting their loved ones. Cynthia Hoffman spent her entire life in Anchorage. Family and friends described her as a bright and kind girl working hard to achieve her American dream. She faced challenges due to a developmental delay, which made her school experience difficult. Nevertheless, Cynthia never gave up, consistently aimed for greater achievements. She graduated from high school, completed driving school, and secured a job at a diner. She cherished her friendships, particularly with her best friend Denali Bremer. The two had been friends since elementary school and had plans to go to college together. Although she aspired to attend college, those dreams were ultimately unfulfilled. Cynthia's parents were divorced, but she had good relationships with both her father, Timothy Hoffman, and her mother, who both supported her endeavors. On June 2, 2019, 19-year-old Cynthia missed a scheduled meeting with her father. Timothy, a construction worker, often brought Cynthia along on part-time jobs, where she helped him with minor tasks. In return, he paid her, teaching her the importance of hard work and saving money from a young age. Cynthia had assisted her father frequently for over a year, and they saw each other daily. On that particular day, she was expected to meet him after school. Her father had promised to pay her for past work when he was short on cash, so she was excited to go because it meant she would get paid double. She also mentioned that she needed money for a party that weekend. Cynthia texted her father to let him know she was at the park for a meeting and promised to return in about an hour. Timothy waited for her, but she never came back. He tried calling her phone and sending her messages, but she didn't respond. He thought it was possible she was just out with friends and lost track of time, so he hesitated to call the police. However, none of his messages were read, and his calls went unanswered throughout the day. Concerned about his daughter and her unexplained absence, he decided to contact the authorities. When Timothy arrived at the police station, he reported Cynthia as missing. The police took the case seriously and quickly began their investigation. They organized search teams, brought in volunteers. Timothy joined the search right away, driving around the city and asking people if they had seen his daughter. He showed them her photo, but despite his efforts all day, he couldn't find any useful information. From the beginning, he had a nagging feeling that something was wrong. Cynthia's behavior was unusual. She had never been gone for this long before, and she didn't have any mental health issues or a tendency to run away. She was naive, needed guidance. There had been no family conflicts or signs that she wanted to leave. In the days that followed, Timothy began to lose hope for a positive outcome. He started to fear that someone had lured his daughter to the park with harmful intentions, despite the ongoing search. The police initially thought Timothy might have more information, but he had a verified alibi during this time. Timothy stayed in touch with Cynthia's friends, particularly her best friend Denali, who had been in regular contact with Cynthia and was one of the last to see her. Denali expressed that she had no knowledge of Cynthia's whereabouts and hoped for her safe return. She requested updates if Timothy discovered any new information. Meanwhile, some school friends reported that they last saw Cynthia and Denali leaving together in a car, heading off in an unknown direction. This raised suspicions, as lying seemed unnecessary unless someone had something to conceal. When investigators looked into Cynthia's social media, they found that a person named Tyler had invited her for a ride, which she had accepted. This invitation coincided with the timing of her disappearance. With no new leads, detectives began tracking Cynthia's contacts leading up to her missing status. Who is Tyler? What was Cynthia doing, and where was she headed? Her classmates confirmed that she had planned to meet her father to help him with work and collect her payment. After the police spoke with Denali, she changed her story about Timothy. She admitted that after classes, she and Cynthia were walking to their cars when she dropped Cynthia off at the nearest city park. Following that, Cynthia sent her father a message updating him on her whereabouts and promised to see him later. However, after those messages, Cynthia's phone went silent. The search efforts then shifted from the city streets to the dense underbrush of the park. On June 4, 2019, just 2 days after her missing, Cynthia Hoffman was discovered dead. The 19-year-old's body was found on the banks of the Ekludna River, a popular tourist spot. Her hands were tied behind her back, and her mouth was taped shut. The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head, inflicted from behind. Sadly, the concerns of her loving father were realized. Around the same time, Denali's mother went to the police station to report that Denali and her friend might know where Cynthia had gone and could be connected to the case. According to Denali's mother, both Denali and her 16-year-old friend, Caden McIntosh, claimed to know what happened to Cynthia. They were both interrogated, with the police particularly focused on why Denali was using a different name. When they met Caden, he caught the officer's attention. The boy was visibly shaking and gave confused, evasive answers, leading them to believe he should be questioned first. Caden was extremely nervous and soon admitted to murdering Cynthia Hoffman. He claimed that his 18-year-old girlfriend, Denali, had planned the murder but could not explain why. Denali was uncooperative from the start, avoiding communication with investigators, refuting Caden's account, and presenting an alternate narrative. She stated that she, Caden, and Cynthia went to Thunderbird Falls after school for a photo shoot. They intended to create a unique scene that involved using tape and ropes to stage a kidnapping, with Cynthia's mouth taped and her hands bound. Denali admitted that she carried a gun for self-defense, and all participants in the plan were aware of this. She recounted that at one point, Caden took the gun, aimed it at Cynthia, and attacked her in the back of the head without any clear reason. Denali said she was shocked and confused afterward, unsure of how to respond. The group simply disposed of the body in the water and left, as Caden commanded her to do so in a threatening manner, which intimidated her into compliance. She felt it wasn't worth informing the police to avoid causing a panic, worried that she might become another victim. Additionally, she couldn't provide any information about a motive for the murder. There were no known conflicts among them, and no one had witnessed such cruelty before. As a result of the statements, Caden McIntosh was charged with murdering Cynthia Hoffman. Criminologists examined the crime scene, and forensic experts conducted an autopsy. This led to the collection of enough evidence to reconstruct the events of June 2nd. However, the stories told by the young people at the police station contained many inconsistencies, particularly regarding the motive, which remained unclear. The mystery was clarified when law enforcement accessed Denali's mobile phone. They discovered that she was not just a witness to the murder, but also involved in it. The situation became clearer after examining her messages. After Cynthia's death, Denali posted on social media, "Oh, look what we just did," directed at someone named Tyler. This message was shockingly cynical and cruel, revealing not a grieving best friend but rather a brutal killer who took pride in her actions. The police obtained a Snapchat video that served as crucial evidence of Denali's guilt. This prompted them to question her again, as there was enough evidence to charge both Caden and Denali in connection with the murder. Caden claimed he had been manipulated and that Denali had suggested the attack. She continued to deny any wrongdoing until she was asked about Tyler, who was saved in her phone as a babe. The police found that shortly before the tragedy, Denali met a man from Kansas on an app where he claimed to be a millionaire. They started off communicating and flirting, but eventually, he sent her a disturbing message. Tyler gradually got Denali to open up about her preferences, including her intimate desires. He revealed that he was willing to pay $9 million for photos and videos depicting abuse violence. Denali became intrigued, and over time, her friend on social media convinced her to kill. Cynthia was an easy target because she was Denali's best friend, very naive, and completely trusted her. This made it easy for Denali to lure her into a trap. Investigators identified the car used by the young killers during the murder. It belonged to a relative of Denali. They interviewed Denali's 19-year cousin, Caleb Leland, who was aware of the $9 million offer and supported Denali, thinking the money would solve their financial issues. Denali had asked to borrow his car to take the victim and her accomplice to the murder scene. In return, she promised him $500,000. After agreeing to help facilitate the murder of an innocent person, Caleb was fully aware of her intentions. He confirmed that Cynthia's murder was not a result of a desire for a photo shoot or an accident. It was a planned act of revenge for money. Denali had discussed her plans with her brothers, detailing where she intended to take her best friend and outlining the murder plan in great detail. Although Caleb didn't fully believe Denali was serious at first, he grasped the seriousness of the situation only after hearing about Cynthia's death. However, his disbelief was just a cover. He was trying to downplay his role in the tragedy to lessen his potential punishment. Between May and June 2019, police focused their investigation on 3 suspects: Denali Bremer, Caden McIntosh, and Caleb Leland. They were believed to have plotted a murder together. As detectives gathered more evidence, it became increasingly clear that these teenagers were guilty. Notably, all 3 were friends of the victim, yet they betrayed her without remorse. Tragically, they valued $9 million more than the life of their friend. Investigators also found that 2 other teenagers were aware of the crime. However, they were minors at the time of the attack and were not considered accomplices. They had simply overheard Denali confessing to the crime. Their failure to report this information was disappointing, as they could have helped prevent the tragedy by alerting the police. To protect the minors and their families, their names were kept confidential and did not come up in court. The planning for the massacre began 4 months before the murder. On June 2, 2019, the juvenile offenders launched their attack. Denali invited Cynthia to join her and Caden on a hike to a remote area near Thunderbird Falls deep in the park. The accomplices had meticulously prepared their plan, even practicing with an unloaded gun. Denali pretended to be a future victim and used her brother's car, which he had lent her for $500,000. Once they reached the riverbank, Caden and Cynthia temporarily left Denali behind and advanced ahead. Suddenly, Caden drew a gun and pointed it at Cynthia's head. Denali caught up, restrained Cynthia by tying her hands and taping her mouth shut. Cynthia quickly realized this was not a prank, but it was too late for her to escape or shout for help. Terrified, she was forced to kneel. Denali's brother filmed the entire incident. Caden then shot Cynthia in the back of the head with a 9mm pistol, killing her instantly. Denali and Caden disposed of her body in the river and tried to erase any evidence linking them to the crime. They burned some of Cynthia's belongings, including her purse and mobile phone. Afterward, Denali sent a message to Cynthia's father, Timothy, from Cynthia's phone, fabricating a story about a scheduled meeting with a new boyfriend. Detectives later found evidence that Denali attempted to delete data from her mobile phone. However, despite her efforts, many conversations with Tyler remained, in which she detailed the murder plan and shared photos and videos related to the crime. Even after the murder was committed, she unsuccessfully tried to erase the incriminating evidence. In reality, she stayed in contact with Tyler throughout the murder, providing him with detailed updates. Although Tyler lived hundreds of kilometers away, he was just as responsible for the crime as the individuals who carried it out. Law enforcement focused on identifying him to ensure he faced justice. It is important to note that Tyler sought not only murder but also abuse violence. However, forensic experts found no evidence of such acts on the victim's body. This raised alarming implications, suggesting that if incentives had been provided, Denali and her accomplices might have continued to commit similar crimes. Fortunately, they were identified and arrested immediately after the first murder, and they did not receive any compensation from Tyler. Specialists were called in to investigate and traced the phone number of the perpetrator. It was revealed that Tyler was not in Kansas, but in Indiana. The actual mastermind behind the brutal crime was Darren Schillmiller, who grew up in New Salisbury. He had been exchanging photos with Denali for a while, but he had not sent her any pictures of himself. At first, Tyler had pretended to be a wealthy millionaire who won the lottery, but in reality, the instigator of the crime was a 21-year-old who was far from being a millionaire. Friends and family described him as a reclusive and strange person who had faced bullying during school. Darren had endured a difficult upbringing with an alcoholic father and had minimal social interaction in school. His unusual clothing style often led to conflicts, and after graduation, he was frequently seen engaging in suspicious activities, like chasing cats that later vanished without a trace. However, there had been no previous reports of cruelty from him. After completing his studies, he found it difficult to determine his path in life and was unable to secure a full-time job. This situation took Denali by surprise, as she genuinely thought she would receive $9 million for her crime. Once Denali discovered Tyler's real identity, she chose to cooperate with the prosecution. She revealed that she had been in an online relationship with Tyler for several months, during which he used pictures of an unrelated person from the internet to deceive her. This manipulation led her to be misled by the future killer. Denali expressed her desire to resolve her problems, and those of her family, through money, having dealt with her friend. However, this was not the only troubling request from the millionaire's friend. According to her, he urged her to commit abuse violence against 2 children, intending to use a 14-year-old and an 8-year-old boy for this purpose. They were meant to suffer and die in pain, enduring torture, abuse. Fortunately, this horrific plan never came to fruition. When the police arrived at Darren's door, he was taken aback and promptly confessed to everything. He admitted to having been in contact with Denali for several months, realized that she was easily influenced and manipulated. Consequently, this quiet, deceitful man convinced himself that he could take someone's life through another person. Denali acknowledged that she remained influenced by Tyler, even after he refused to finance the initial massacre. They continued to have faith in him, waited for payment, and naively hoped for a better life ahead. Meanwhile, Tyler manipulated them, holding on to their trust while blackmailing them with incriminating evidence of the murder. He then demanded more killings and continued his threats. Fortunately, law enforcement apprehended the entire gang before further harm could be done. The prosecutor's office charged all those involved in the massacre with conspiracy and premeditated murder. The 2 youngest participants, whose identities were never revealed, were also accused of being complicit because they hid the murderers' identities. They never even informed her parents, despite having the chance to potentially save her. The crime that occurred in Alaska gained significant media attention, sparking public outrage. Journalists were eager for a sensational story, which created challenges for the victim's family. The relatives of the young offenders also faced severe repercussions, including numerous threats and genuine fears for their safety. Cynthia's family mourned her loss, lamenting that her trusting nature and vulnerability, stemming from her developmental delays, ultimately led to her suffering. With the same level of intelligence as a 12-year-old, she believes she is surrounded by trustworthy individuals. Many people who knew Darren spoke to the media and the police about him. Several of his classmates described him as a strange teenager who was withdrawn and struggled to fit in. It was not surprising that he grew into a cruel internet troll with violent intentions. Detectives discovered a significant amount of incriminating material on his computer, including numerous files of child abuse, which led to additional charges against him. He also showed a disturbing desire for cruelty and torture. Evidence revealed that Denali was not the first victim of this liar. He used various social networks and messaging apps to create fake accounts, deceiving teenagers and even children. Initially, his actions were limited to obtaining obscene images, but feeling untouchable, he escalated his behavior. Over several years, he lured dozens of girls and women into his traps. Some of the victims, from whom he extorted obscene photos, testified in court. Once he received the first image, he began to blackmail them for more. Fortunately, many prior victims managed to escape Darren's grasp, partly due to police threats. Unfortunately, this was not the case for Denali, whom Darren acknowledged was the most naive of his victims. Denali and his accomplices were involved in one of the most serious crimes in Alaskan history, the brutal murder of Cynthia Hoffman. This tragic event highlighted themes of betrayal, greed, and folly. Cynthia fell victim to an online manipulator, failing to verify his identity, and ultimately led 4 others into the murder. The case remained confidential, but the lives of everyone involved were forever altered. In February 2023, Denali Bremer, 23, pleaded guilty to first-degree murder after charges of conspiracy to commit murder, solicitation to commit murder, tampering with evidence, and second-degree murder were dismissed. Nearly a year later, her sentencing will take place over 3 days in January and February 2024. The 99-year sentence is the maximum the court is allowed to impose, according to a press release from the Alaska Department of Justice. Caleb Leland, who provided the car for the crime, pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in November 2023 and was sentenced to 30 years in prison in August 2024. On May 17, 2024, Caden McIntosh, 21, pleaded guilty to the murder of Cynthia. Anchorage Superior Court Judge Andrew Peterson accepted Caden's guilty plea to 1 count of second-degree murder. All other counts were dismissed as part of the agreement. The court will decide Caden's sentence at a sentencing hearing. The agreement between the parties allows the court to sentence Caden to a prison term of 30 to 85 years. Sentencing is scheduled to begin on November 14, 2024, before Judge Peterson, and is expected to last 2 days. Caden is currently in the custody of the Alaska Department of Corrections and is no longer eligible for release under the terms of his release. Darren Showmiller, who solicited the murder, was 25 when his trial began. He chose not to defend himself, allowing his lawyer to read a statement to the jury. Darren admitted to making a grave mistake that led to the death of an innocent girl, expressing remorse and asking for forgiveness from her family. However, these words did not sway the jury, and he was sentenced to 99 years in prison for his actions that destroyed multiple lives. Every year on the anniversary of Cynthia's death, her father organizes a motorcycle ride to celebrate. Timothy Hoffman, 58, was among those attending the event on June 2, 2024, when friends and family gathered to remember Cynthia. However, he lost control of his motorcycle and died in the accident. In a seemingly quiet house, fear permeated the air. A family was trapped in a room, holding their breath and hoping that the locked door would protect them. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. The lock broke, someone collapsed, and footsteps echoed in the hallway. This was not just a random burglary, it was a premeditated act. When the police arrived in the morning, they discovered a perplexing crime scene. A family of 4 and their 3 dogs were found shot dead in their home. It appeared to be a robbery, yet nothing had been taken. All clues pointed toward one individual, but the real question remained: who was truly in control? As detectives looked for answers, they realized the situation involved far more than just love, jealousy, or revenge. Someone had orchestrated everything. When the truth finally emerged, it was more shocking than anyone could have anticipated. Nathaniel Huey Jr. was born around 1993 in an environment where crime and violence were common. As a child, he displayed a reckless, rebellious attitude. He had little interest in school, often fighting with classmates and neglecting his studies. His first run-in with the law occurred during his teenage years when he was caught participating in a robbery. Due to his age, he faced minimal consequences. Nathaniel soon discovered that a life of crime offered not only excitement but also financial rewards. His criminal activities escalated, and by 2016, he was imprisoned for assault. A year later, he was arrested again for driving under the influence. Nathaniel had a particular fascination with firearms. He built a collection of guns. Although the courts prohibited him from owning firearms, he disregarded this ban, turned to the black market to acquire weapons illegally. Despite his criminal history, Nathaniel attempted to pose as a legitimate businessman by starting a private security company, even though it was not properly licensed. Legally, he was not allowed to carry a weapon, yet he boasted about his supposed authority on social media, posting pictures of himself in tactical gear and heavily armed. On the other side of the story is Ermelinda Palomo, born on 1973. By the time she met Nathaniel, she was a fiercely independent woman, a mother of 5, and already a grandmother. Although she had a stable upbringing, her personal life was marked by challenges. She had married young, but the marriage ended, leaving her to raise her children on her own. Determined to support them, she held multiple jobs while managing her responsibilities as both a mother and grandmother. She was strict with her family, which earned her respect but sometimes led to resentment. When she met Nathaniel, those around her found it hard to understand their connection. He was 20 years younger, had a tumultuous past, and represented the chaos she had always tried to avoid. Some say they met through mutual friends, but regardless of the circumstances, their relationship moved quickly. Initially, Ermelinda brushed Nathaniel off, but his confidence, persistence, and reckless charm drew her in. For Nathaniel, Ermelinda represented stability and a sense of security he had never experienced. For her, it was a new adventure, an opportunity to feel in control over someone with a free lifestyle. Their relationship was unconventional, with an attraction rooted in their differences. Soon, they moved in together, sharing a crowded home with Ermelinda's children and grandchildren, but their living situation was anything but harmonious. Nathaniel's obsession with weapons remained strong over the years. Despite legal restrictions, he continued to buy and show off firearms, making secret deals and finding loopholes to justify his actions. For him, guns were not just a collection, they were a part of who he was. He always carried a weapon, even inside the house, frequently took apart and cleaned his firearms on the kitchen table. At first, Ermelinda paid little attention to this behavior. She was more focused on the money he made than the legality of his actions. However, as time passed, she began to realize that Nathaniel's interests went beyond financial gain. He was unpredictable and could become angry over minor issues, such as a misplaced word or an unfriendly glance. His temper could shift from intense rage to unnerving calm in an instant. Cristiana Espinoza, one of Ermelinda's daughters, was the first to express concern. Unlike others who ignored the warning signs, she recognized Nathaniel for who he really was, a dangerous man. She noticed how he talked about violence, carried himself with arrogance, and never tolerated being contradicted. But what scared her the most was how quickly he could lose control. By 2021, Nathaniel and Ermelinda had been living together for 6 years. On the surface, their relationship appeared stable, but its foundation had deteriorated long ago. Nathaniel had always been unfaithful, and his affairs had become routine. He used social media to meet new women, engaged in secretive conversations, and carefully deleted his messages. Often, he would leave late at night, providing vague excuses about work or meetings. Ermelinda would wake up in the middle of the night to find him gone. He would return by dawn without any explanation. Nathaniel never feared being caught. He thought Ermelinda either wouldn't discover his infidelities or wouldn't confront him if she did. He mistakenly believed he had all the control, not recognizing Ermelinda's true strength. At first, Ermelinda chose to overlook the warning signs, but soon the evidence became too clear to ignore. His late nights, secretive messages, and newfound obsession with his appearance all indicated something troubling. Her fears were confirmed when she saw a suspicious message pop up on his phone, leaving no room for doubt. Rather than confronting him right away, Ermelinda decided to gather evidence. If Nathaniel thought he was safe from consequences, he was about to find out otherwise. She began monitoring him closely, observing his movements, noting his habits, and even checking his messages when he wasn't paying attention. Before long, she could tell when he was lying, when he was trying to cover his tracks, and when he was sneaking off for yet another secret meeting. With each new revelation, her anger grew stronger. She realized she had two options: to leave him behind and erase him from her life, or to make him regret every decision that led to this moment. The more she considered it, the clearer her resolve became. She refused to be just another woman he discarded. If she wanted to make him feel pain, she had to be strategic. Instead of erupting into an argument, she decided on a different approach. She would make him feel cornered. She planned to turn his own life against him. Ermelinda's plan began with deception. She created fake social media accounts, selecting photos and inventing identities to construct believable personas. She studied online scams to learn how to manipulate and deceive effectively. This included understanding threats, the structure of underground networks, psychological tactics. Her most powerful tool was information. She figured out how to track locations, access hidden data, and manipulate the digital landscape in ways Nathaniel would not anticipate. Then, she initiated her scheme. Her first contact with Nathaniel came through a woman who seemed genuinely interested in him. As expected, he fell for it and responded eagerly, unaware that he was entering Ermelinda's trap. Initially, their conversations appeared harmless, consisting of light flirtation. However, she began to drop hints about his life that she shouldn't have known, leading him to believe someone was monitoring him. The tipping point came when she sent him a message with his real-time location. This left Nathaniel unsettled. Ermelinda could see the change in his demeanor as he started looking over his shoulder and checking his surroundings. But her tactics were far from over. The next phase of deception brought in new individuals. Nathaniel began receiving messages from various people. Some were threatening, while others falsely claimed to offer him protection. They contacted him through different platforms and phone numbers, without any clear pattern. Some messages demanded money, while others warned him to avoid certain locations. A few suggested that he was already involved in something much larger than himself. This confusion was intentional. His behavior changed almost overnight. He became restless and anxious, avoided answering unknown calls, constantly checked his surroundings, and even asked Ermelinda to drive him around to ensure he wasn't being followed. He changed his passwords and deleted messages, trying to rid himself of the unseen threat. However, the more he attempted to escape, the more entangled he became in Ermelinda's scheme. She observed with satisfaction as paranoia consumed him. Unbeknownst to him, the real danger was lurking right under his roof. In May 2023, a new woman entered Nathaniel's life, Zoraida Bartolome, one of his co-workers. Zoraida was already entangled in her own complicated situation. She was married with 2 children but was unhappy at home. She had cheated in the past and didn't feel guilty about it, believing that her own happiness was more important than being loyal. For Nathaniel, Zoraida represented an exciting escape from his troubled relationship with Ermelinda. Their connection began with stolen glances and quiet conversations, quickly escalating into something they both found hard to abandon. Ermelinda had been observing Nathaniel closely and noticed a shift in his behavior. At first, she assumed Zoraida was just another fleeting romance, but then she discovered messages that revealed deeper feelings. Nathaniel was telling Zoraida that he loved her and wanted a future together. She reciprocated those feelings, and they fantasized about leaving everything behind to start anew. As Ermelinda read their exchanges, she felt a mix of pain and humiliation. Despite her efforts to protect their relationship, Nathaniel was pursuing another woman. Now, she felt compelled to take drastic action against him. She escalated the psychological manipulation, introducing even more frightening figures into Nathaniel's life. He was no longer just being observed, he felt as if he was being hunted. Nathaniel had endured too much to feel fear anymore. He had survived the worst, or so he thought. Now, all that mattered to him was Zoraida. Leaving her was not an option. For the first time, he wasn't merely hiding an affair, he was fighting for it. Ermelinda noticed this change in him. If she couldn't break Nathaniel directly, she would aim to destroy Zoraida instead. Her first tactic was to undermine Zoraida's stability. Using her network of fake accounts, she contacted Zoraida's husband, Alberto Rolón. Initially, she planted vague doubts through anonymous messages that suggested betrayal. She even included photos of Zoraida and Nathaniel together, ensuring they were clear enough to raise suspicion. However, Alberto was not easily swayed. He dismissed the warnings, unwilling to accept that his wife could deceive him so openly. That's when Ermelinda intensified her approach. The subsequent messages were not just about infidelity, they included threats. Unsigned letters arrived at their home with clear implications. If Alberto did not take action, his family would be in danger. Alberto began to observe Zoraida more intently. The tension in their home was exactly as Ermelinda had intended. However, Nathaniel was still unwilling to let go. Even as paranoia invaded his life, he held on to Zoraida as if she were his last hope. Ermelinda manipulated his perceptions, convincing him that Zoraida was providing information to the people spying on him. She crafted a story so believable that even Nathaniel began to doubt his own reality. Using fake accounts, she sent messages from imaginary informants, all suggesting the same idea. Zoraida wasn't just a woman Nathaniel had fallen for, she was working against him and was the source of the ongoing threats. Nathaniel's paranoia took over him completely. He confronted Ermelinda about his suspicions, and she played along convincingly. Initially, she seemed unsure, but then she reluctantly confessed that she had also received warnings about Zoraida. Nathaniel realized he could no longer dismiss these concerns. He had to take action to ensure his survival. Next, Ermelinda put him to the ultimate test of loyalty. She made him believe that his supposed enemies were closely monitoring him and required evidence that he hadn't betrayed them. The only way he could prove his loyalty was by making a crucial decision himself: kill Zoraida. By the time Nathaniel reached his decision, he felt no hesitation. There was no fear or regret, just a cold, determined focus on what needed to be done. He started planning immediately, treating the situation like a mission. Nathaniel studied Zoraida's routines, tracked her schedule, and identified when she was most vulnerable. He noted when Alberto was home, when the children were asleep, and when it would be easiest to enter the house. He mapped out potential escape routes, looking for surveillance cameras and memorizing the neighborhood layout. Simultaneously, he prepared his supplies. He already had a stockpile of weapons but gathered additional tools, including clothing to help him blend into the night, gloves to avoid leaving fingerprints, tape, and a flashlight. Together with Ermelinda, he chose items carefully, ensuring no one would suspect anything. Although Ermelinda remained in the background and was not directly involved, she always provided guidance to keep him on track. By the time everything was ready, Nathaniel had stopped considering the consequences. The night came. Ermelinda drove toward Zoraida's house with an unsettling calmness, acting as if it were just another evening. She even asked Nathaniel why he needed to go there, though she already knew the reason. He didn't answer. He no longer cared about her opinion, only the task ahead mattered. When they arrived at the house, Ermelinda remained in the car while Nathaniel got out. As he expected, the front door was locked. He quietly moved around to the side of the house, found a window, and broke the glass. The sound startled Alberto awake. He sat up, listened intently, and then cautiously approached the noise. By that time, Nathaniel was already inside. As soon as Alberto rounded the corner, Nathaniel fired his gun, but his shot went wide. Realizing this was more than just a break-in, Alberto turned and ran toward the hallway, desperate to reach his family's room before the intruder. However, Nathaniel was quicker. Gunshots rang out through the house. Alberto fell to the ground before he could reach the door. For a brief moment, There was silence. Then the next gunshot broke the stillness, sending Zoraida into a panic. Without thinking, she rushed to the bedroom, pulling her children along, and slammed the door shut, locking it behind her. She knew Nathaniel was inside and was unsure how many others he was with, but her priority was to keep her family safe. Moments later, Nathaniel slammed his shoulder against the door, trying to force it open, but it held strong. Frustrated, he stepped back, aimed his gun, and shot at the lock. The bullet pierced through the wood. Zoraida gasped as the impact hit her. She stiffened and then collapsed. The door swung open, the children huddled together, their eyes filled with fear. The neighbors only heard a few brief, muffled gunshots. It all happened within minutes. Nathaniel looked around at the scene, took a deep breath to calm himself, and then began to methodically rearrange things. He flipped over furniture, opened drawers, and scattered valuable items on the floor to make it appear as though a robbery had taken place. Once he finished, he stepped over the bodies and exited into the night. Ermelinda was waiting for him in the car. She didn't need to ask how it went, her expression said it all. They drove away silently, leaving the chaos behind. The sounds had awakened the neighborhood, and after a few minutes, someone finally summoned the courage to call 911. Soon after, sirens filled the street. Officers arrived to find shattered glass, a broken door, and clear signs of a break-in. Inside, the bodies revealed a much darker story than just a failed robbery. Nathaniel had made serious mistakes, careless ones. Nothing of value had been stolen. The disarray of his possessions seemed like a feeble attempt to mislead. It was evident that this incident wasn't simply about theft, it was premeditated and targeted. By morning, detectives were connecting the crime to Nathaniel Huey, the only person with a motive. At Zoraida's workplace, everyone knew about their affair. It hadn't been a secret. As detectives continued to investigate, things looked increasingly bad for Nathaniel. His history was filled with crimes, assaults, suspicious dealings, and a collection of weapons. As the police gathered evidence, Ermelinda maintained her facade. She kept messaging Nathaniel, using the false identity she had created. She assured him that everything was under control, claiming the mafia was protecting him and that as long as he followed their instructions, he'd be safe. He trusted her, but the investigation was progressing more quickly than Ermelinda anticipated. They scrutinized Nathaniel's recent activities, analyzing every call, email, and text message. One thing stood out: in recent months, he had received a flood of anonymous threats, warnings of danger, and claims that he was being hunted. However, all those messages had originated from newly created accounts. If this were truly a mafia operation, why was the evidence focusing solely on Nathaniel? The more the detectives uncovered, the clearer it became that the threats were staged, as if someone had been fabricating a false narrative specifically for him. This was the turning point in the investigation. Nathaniel was in a downward spiral. He sensed that the police were closing in on him and started noticing unmarked cars tailing him, along with strangers watching him too closely. He convinced himself that the mafia was still after him, waiting for him to make a mistake. In his desperation, he reached out to the only person he believed he could trust, his mother. He begged her for help, claiming he was being falsely accused of something terrible and needed to go into hiding. However, she refused to help him. With nowhere else to turn, Nathaniel managed to stay hidden for a few days, but eventually, security cameras captured him in a grocery store. A manhunt ensued, with patrol cars flooding the area, but by the time the officers arrived, Nathaniel and Ermelinda had already made it onto the highway. The chase began, police followed with sirens blaring for miles, but Nathaniel had no plans to stop. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, accelerating and weaving through traffic in a frantic attempt to flee. Ermelinda had carefully planned every detail leading up to this moment, and now she was watching her plan unfold perfectly. Ahead of them, traffic became congested. Nathaniel attempted to navigate around a truck, but he lost his grip, causing the tire to screech against the road. The car spun out of control, crashing into the guardrail and flipping multiple times before coming to a sudden stop. Officers surrounded the wreck, weapons drawn. Nathaniel slumped in the driver's seat, a gun in his hand, while Ermelinda sat motionless beside him. In those final moments, he had turned the gun on her and then himself. Investigators sifted through the wreckage, trying to understand what had transpired inside the car. Did he realize what was happening? The investigation didn't stop there. Detectives focused on Ermelinda's devices. Hidden within her files were hundreds of messages, chat logs, and notes detailing her manipulation of Nathaniel, dozens of fake accounts that she had carefully created and controlled. She had constructed this elaborate scheme. She understood how to break a person's will and instill fear so deeply that they would do anything to escape it. And it had worked. Nathaniel had never been in danger. There was no mafia. The true enemy had been sitting right beside him all along. In the end, the case was closed, but one question lingered. Did Nathaniel understand the situation before he took action? Ermelinda's calculated plan, fueled by wounded pride and a desire for revenge, transformed Nathaniel from an unfaithful partner into a paranoid pawn who unwittingly executed her deadly scheme. The Romeoville murders, disguised as a robbery, revealed the devastating consequences of unchecked emotions and hidden motives. As the investigation uncovered Ermelinda's intricate web of lies, it left one lingering question unanswered. Did Nathaniel ever glimpse the truth behind his actions, or did he remain trapped in her illusions until the end? The street was calm and peaceful late at night. Suddenly, the calm was broken by a noise. What happened next was shockingly violent and seemed carefully planned. The most troubling part was that she had warned others about the possibility of this event, but no one intervened. Alessandra Mattuzzi was born and raised in Italy and spent most of her life in the fashion industry. At 56, she worked as a sales representative for a boutique specializing in women's clothing. Those who knew her well described her as reliable, thoughtful, and elegant. She approached every task with precision and grace, whether assisting a customer or caring for a loved one. Alessandra was particularly known for her deep compassion. Her sense of duty went beyond her job. She had been her father's main caregiver during his final illness, providing unwavering support until his death. This experience left her emotionally exhausted. Afterward, she became withdrawn, avoiding social interactions and hesitating to form new relationships. Alessandra's daily life centered around her mother, who lived in a care home and needed constant care. She followed a regular routine that included frequent visits to her mother and daily phone calls with her younger sister, Stefania, with whom she had a strong bond. Although Alessandra was reserved, she maintained an online presence that showcased her life. Her social media accounts featured images of family gatherings, stylish work outfits, and quiet moments with her pet. She preferred calm environments and meaningful relationships over large social events. Everything changed in the summer of 2021 when she encountered a young man named Giovanni Padovani on social media. Giovanni, aged 27, was originally from Sicily. He lived an active lifestyle as a professional football player and part-time model. His social media was lively and well-followed, showcasing training sessions, travel adventures, and insights into photo shoots. His online persona was polished and charismatic, earning him admiration from many, particularly women. His friendly, approachable demeanor suggested he was both confident and down-to-earth. Despite their age difference, Alessandra and Giovanni connected easily from the start. Giovanni was respectful and kind, showing no signs of arrogance. As time went on, their messages became more frequent, transitioning from simple greetings to deeper conversations about their lives and feelings. Their digital exchanges developed into genuine emotional connections, and they began communicating almost daily. They sharing photos, life updates, and words of support. Eventually, Giovanni planned a visit to Alessandra in Bologna, where she lived. During his visit, he took the time to understand her world without being intrusive. One gesture that stood out was his offer to visit Alessandra's mother at the care home. This thoughtful act left a lasting impression, showing that he cared not only about Alessandra but also about the life she had built and the people she cherished. In the months that followed, Giovanni kept visiting Bologna. He and Alessandra spent peaceful moments together, walking around the city, cooking, and doing errands. He joined her in her daily activities and seemed to appreciate the slower pace of her life. He appeared to genuinely care for her, capturing their moments together in photos he occasionally shared online. In private messages, he expressed his support and affection for her. To onlookers, their relationship might have seemed surprising yet meaningful, as two very different lives came together. Shortly after the new year, the sense of security began to fade. Giovanni's behavior changed. He started calling more frequently, sometimes multiple times a day, and his questions became highly specific. What had once seemed like affectionate curiosity turned into suspicion. He wanted to know who she was talking to, what she was doing, and why. Their conversations morphed into interrogations filled with doubt. Then, he began accusing her of hiding things. There was no basis for his claims. His obsession extended beyond Alessandra. He started calling Stefania directly, trying to persuade her to adopt his distorted perspective. While he initially sought her support, his behavior grew increasingly erratic. His tone shifted from persuasive to aggressive. Stefania remembered how he used to yell during phone calls, his voice loud and full of accusations. Eventually, she cut all contact with him. In contrast, Alessandra chose to stay connected, believing that the difficult times would eventually pass. She tried to avoid arguments and calm the situation down in hopes of restoring balance. However, the man who had once seemed emotionally understanding became more controlling. His jealousy took hold, and even minor social media interactions, likes, photos, comments, sparked new conflicts. He demanded explanations for every little thing. As his obsession grew, so did his need for control. He began calling her at all hours of the night, and his messages shifted from sweet to overwhelming, and often filled with frustration or regret. Alessandra's sense of peace was shattered. His unpredictable moods drained her, and his expectations were unrealistic. Yet, he continued to intrude into her life in increasingly invasive ways. In early 2022, the situation worsened for Alessandra. After one of her visits, she discovered she was locked out of her email and social media accounts. When she tried to recover them, she found that the new passwords contained clues and references linked to Giovanni, making her suspect he had accessed her computer. The more she investigated, the more alarming things became. Her WhatsApp account was connected to a foreign device, and spyware was later found on her phone. This spyware allowed Giovanni not only to monitor her but also to read her messages, check her call logs, track her location in real time. His surveillance was intentional and methodical. Alessandra's suspicions were confirmed when Giovanni started mentioning private conversations she had never disclosed to him. He was aware of who she had communicated with and when. He challenged her with distorted interpretations of her online interactions, convinced she was being unfaithful despite having no evidence. His delusions intensified, and he demanded constant proof of her location, short videos every 10 minutes showing where she was and who she was with. When Alessandra refused to comply, he erupted in anger, threatening to end their relationship, accuse her of betrayal, or overwhelm her with messages until she complied. His demeanor became cold, controlling. Alessandra felt she was no longer an equal partner in the relationship. Instead, she felt watched, judged, and trapped. Giovanni's actions took a terrifying turn when he gained access to Alessandra's home surveillance system. He even sent a screenshot of her inside her apartment to her, revealing he had been watching her in what she thought was a safe space. By mid-2022, Giovanni's behavior became overtly predatory. He not only monitored her online but also started to follow her in person. He loitered around her apartment building in Bologna, appearing at strange hours without any notice. Neighbors began to take notice. One saw him attempting to enter the building, while another spotted him on the roof. He was no longer attempting to conceal his intentions. Her life became dominated by anxiety. Giovanni had become unpredictable and dangerous. The damage began to escalate. Someone tampered with her car, cutting its wiring and disabling the lights. In her apartment, the power was cut when someone removed the fuses. These incidents were more than just vandalism, they were deliberate attempts to force her to confront him. She heard shouting, loud bangs against her walls, and items being smashed in her home. At one point, he even climbed back onto the roof, trying to break in again. What had once seemed like affection had turned into obsession. All personal boundaries had been shattered. Alessandra, who once led a calm, structured life filled with routine, was now living in a constant state of fear. Alessandra was no longer in a relationship. She felt as though she was being hunted. She started carrying pepper spray. This small change marked a significant emotional shift for someone who once felt confident and graceful. Fear began to permeate her daily life. She confided in friends and family that returning home made her anxious. Sometimes, she sought comfort at her sister Stefania's house, but this relief was always temporary, and her dog had to stay in the apartment. Leaving her dog behind was not an option for Alessandra. This emotional connection forced her to return to a dangerous environment repeatedly. Between July and August, the situation grew more volatile. Alessandra shared her experiences of intimidation and increasing aggression with Stefania. Despite her fear, she was still searching for ways to calm the situation. She avoided direct confrontations, perhaps hoping that silence or a calm demeanor would lessen the obsession. However, Giovanni reacted to her distance by becoming even more aggressive, perceiving her withdrawal as a challenge that needed to be addressed. On July 29, 2022, Alessandra took an important step to protect herself by filing a police report. She documented Giovanni's obsessive behavior, his repeated invasions of her privacy, and his increasingly erratic presence near her home. To support her claims, she provided screenshots of messages, photos of him near her residence, and detailed accounts of the stalking that had troubled her for months. Despite this evidence, the police did not take urgent measures. Days went by, and her fear continued. On August 3rd, she returned to the police with more evidence, including additional sightings and further incidents of interference. Although she reiterated her concerns, the case was still considered in its early stages. Investigators acknowledged her claims, but no protective actions were recommended. There was no restraining order, no formal warning issued, and no police presence near her building. By August 8th, she went back to the police again because the harassment had not ceased. Giovanni still showed up near her home and tried to enter the building. She kept meticulous records of each incident, including car damage, power disruptions, and break-in attempts. His messages had also become more aggressive. Yet, the official response to her situation remained unchanged. A fourth visit took place on August 13th. By that time, Alessandra was both exhausted and terrified. She felt she was being watched, followed, and monitored online. Giovanni's control over her life invaded her personal communications and daily activities. She clearly expressed her fear for her life and provided the police with direct quotes from his messages, which contained threats and psychological manipulation. One of her statements was particularly chilling: "I don't want to die." It was not just a plea, it was a stark warning. However, this was insufficient to prompt urgent action from the authorities. They cited procedural limitations, saying that they needed more witness statements. The investigators minimized the threat because there had been no physical attack, treating the case as simple harassment rather than a potential for violence. They failed to recognize the serious situation unfolding before them. Her family would later contest this failure, asserting that the warnings had been clear, consistent, and serious. The progression of events was evident. What started as an obsession with digital activities escalated into physical intimidation. Giovanni's behavior shifted from being reactive to becoming calculated, repetitive, and dangerous. The most significant evidence emerged on August 20th, 2022, just 3 days before the incident. Giovanni made a checklist on his phone, which investigators later discovered in his Notes app. The list was precise, detailing items such as duct tape, a hammer, and restraints. Below the list was a written plan outlining steps to simulate a conversation, find a way to enter, and gather the necessary tools. The thoroughness of this plan eliminated any doubt about his intentions. This was not an act of impulsive anger, it was deliberate planning. On August 21st, Giovanni left Sicily, where he had been involved in football-related activities, and traveled to Senigallia under the pretense of personal business. He continued his journey, arrived in Bologna on August 22nd. Digital records later confirmed Giovanni's movements in unsettling detail. He entered Bologna quietly, without notifying anyone, including Alessandra. After arriving, he concealed a hammer in a bush near Alessandra's apartment building, placing it strategically in a hidden corner of the residential complex. He had thoroughly scouted the area beforehand, meticulously planning each step. That same day, he climbed to the rooftop of the building and watched Alessandra's movements from above. He had been watching her for months, but this time, he was ready to act. Weeks earlier, Giovanni had made a note on his phone, dated July 2nd, stating, "He will end her because she ended him emotionally." In the note, he portrayed himself as a victim, claiming he had been manipulated and abandoned, pushing him to his breaking point. He was fully aware of the consequences of his actions, writing, "He knows he will end up in prison. This note will explain to the police what she did to him." His intentions were clear. He had made this decision long before he traveled north. On the evening of August 23rd, Alessandra arrived home, unaware that Giovanni was waiting nearby. It was just after 9 p.m., and she was on the phone with her sister, Stefania, in a normal conversation built. As Alessandra approached the entrance of the building, Giovanni emerged from his hiding place. The attack happened in seconds. Stefania, still on the phone, noticed a sudden change. Alessandra's voice shifted, followed by the unmistakable sounds of a violent struggle. In that brief moment, everything fell apart. Witnesses later reported seeing Giovanni attack her. He grabbed a hammer and struck her with such force that the hammerhead broke off the handle. However, he didn't stop there. Giovanni continued to hit her with his fists and then picked up a heavy wrought iron bench from just outside the entrance, using it to beat her repeatedly. He displayed extreme violence, delivering multiple devastating blows. Forensic reports later indicated that she had suffered over 20 traumatic injuries. Alessandra had visible injuries on her skull, chest, arms, and legs, showing evidence of a brutal assault. Her body was found with signs of blunt force trauma, severe fractures, and indications that she had been dragged on the ground. Despite the loud noises and chaos, Giovanni made no attempt to flee. When the police arrived, he was calmly sitting by the front door of the building, waiting. Officers noted his eerie composure. There was no struggle or remorse, only a chilling acceptance of his actions. Alessandra was taken to the hospital, but unfortunately, it was too late. Her injuries were severe, and she died shortly after arriving. The evidence was indisputable. His actions were deliberate, and he made no attempt to hide what he had done. The precision in his timing and the weapon's location revealed clear premeditation. Witnesses described him as quick and confident, as if he had rehearsed the act numerous times in his mind. Stefania's phone call, along with both physical and digital evidence, was essential for piecing together the timeline of events. The entire attack lasted just a few minutes, but it followed months of carefully planned psychological abuse. After his arrest, Giovanni was moved to a psychiatric facility. Initially, he chose to remain silent but later made statements blaming Alessandra for what happened, claiming she caused him emotional pain and had broken him. Investigators, however, recognized this as an attempt to mislead. The crime was clearly planned, documented, and carried out with disturbing precision. Although his defense team requested a psychiatric evaluation, court-appointed experts determined that he was fully aware of his actions. He showed obsessive and controlling behavior but did not qualify for an insanity defense. His mental state was intact, and he acted with intent. During sentencing, Giovanni spoke briefly, describing his experience as a nightmare. He told the court that if they considered him sane, he deserved the maximum penalty. He attempted to portray himself as a broken man, but the court was unaffected by his claims. His attempt to blame his victim fell apart under the weight of the evidence. On February 12, 2024, Giovanni Padovani was found guilty of stalking and the premeditated murder of Alessandra Mattuzzi. He was sentenced to life in prison. The court highlighted several aggravating factors: the cruelty of the attack, his lack of remorse, and the extensive psychological abuse that occurred before the crime. The consequences extended beyond the courtroom. Following Alessandra's death, a surge of online hostility targeted her on social media. Mean comments overwhelmed news articles, with strangers criticizing her looks, clothing, and age, as well as the age difference between her and Giovanni. Some even implied that she had provoked his actions. One of the most alarming remarks came from Donatello Alberti, was then director of Croce Bianca of Ferrara, who suggested that her appearance justified Giovanni's jealousy. The backlash was swift, resulting in Alberti's immediate removal from his position. Alessandra's family responded by filing complaints against 5 individuals for their online harassment. In an unusual move, the Bologna prosecutor's office initiated an investigation into this cyber harassment. This case set a significant legal precedent in Italy, marking one of the first times digital defamation against a deceased victim was prosecuted on such a scale. In the view of both the court and the public, Giovanni's actions were not only murder but also the final result of a prolonged campaign of control, psychological, digital, and physical, a heartbreaking example of a system that failed to intervene in time. Experts later recognized his behavior as classic Othello syndrome, a psychological condition characterized by delusional jealousy. Unlike normal jealousy, this disorder involves persistent, irrational thoughts and doubts about a partner's fidelity, along with an inability to accept reality. In severe cases, it can lead to violence, as was the tragic outcome for Alessandra, who lost her life due to this condition. Alessandra Mattuzzi's life, defined by compassion and grace, was cruelly ended on August 23, 2022, by Giovanni Padovani's calculated violence, despite her desperate pleas for protection. While his life sentence on February 12, 2024, delivered justice, it could not erase the pain of her family, particularly her sister Stefania, nor the sting of a system that failed to act on her warnings. Alessandra's legacy as a devoted daughter, sister, and professional endures, her warmth forever etched in the hearts of those she loved. Her family's fight against post-murder cyber harassment, culminating in a groundbreaking Italian legal precedent, has sparked vital conversations about digital abuse and victim blaming. Though her loss remains a stark reminder of unchecked stalking and domestic violence, Alessandra's memory fuels a call for stronger protections to ensure no one else suffers her fate.